we should be having a public dialogue, and it should be something that rises to the level of legislation. We should not allow the National Institutes of Health or the Department of Defense to allocate funding to amplify these agents so that allegedly we can study them in the case that they fall into the hands of bad people. Because the evidence has shown us that the bad people who actually have unleashed these pathogens since 1991, and by the way, if you go to miscellaneous memorandum 7 and other documents, we can go back to the 1950s. The bad people who unleash these things on the population are us. It is the U.S. who's doing it.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Friday, May 9th, 2025, and I am not going to forget to use the new intro tomorrow. I keep forgetting every single day to use the new amazing intro that was made for us, and there's so much going on that I lose that. Thank you for tuning in today. Right out of the gate, let me know if there's any audio differences. There's some new things in the background. Just let me know if there's anything that stands out as good, bad, otherwise, especially if you can't hear me. So thank you for tuning in today. I have some important things that I wanted to follow up on. I will be doing a show tomorrow. So I'm going to be getting into more around the constitutional issues, the immigration overlaps, foreign policy for the most part tomorrow. So make sure you tune into that. Today, we're going to be focusing on a few important follow-ups. Well, I mean, really, a lot of the stuff we discuss have been follow-ups since we've been covering this stuff for such a long time. But interesting developments, let's say, around, for example, the Epstein list conversation that I think is important to reiterate and how that's continued to, just the ongoing manipulation around it. I want to make sure we start with the conversation of gain of function, because this is a very important central conversation for, I think, a lot of the people in the political sphere today. I think we're kind of shaken free from the previous construct, if you will, because of a lot of impossible things to ignore around the COVID-19 illusion. So a lot of people are, are picking up on the fly around a lot of the new things, some of the things we've been talking about for a very long time. My point is that's a very influential and important conversation. And so to see what happened with the Donald Trump administration, just again, the current iteration of the U.S. government and RFK Jr. involved with the Maha overlap, I think is very important because, yet again, it is being egregiously misrepresented, and not in some, I don't even really see, let's put it this way. The executive order around gain of function that Donald Trump recently put out, which we'll talk about to start, maybe there could be some positive steps through this. Maybe it's one step in a long series of positive steps that will bring it to an official end. I certainly hope so. To argue now that it is stopped is simply not true. Just easily, it will go right through the executive order. And it's weird that a lot of people are making that case. Children's Health Defense said ending gain of function. That's not what's happening. Now, maybe they meant to make it more broad, and the bottom line is that's not actually what happened. But if you dive into it more, it becomes very clear, especially with what they're currently involved in, mRNA platforms, Stargate, all sorts of things that overlap with, in particular, gain of function research. And of course, EPPP, if we want to get into the nuance that Fauci brought to the table. Obviously, what they've already done shows you that I don't think they mean what's happening here. At the very least, it gives people the ammunition to argue that this is, a promise kept, let's say. And I just don't think that's what's happening. And it's not about raining on the parade or trying to go against anything. It's about the truth. And it's about what we can prove. And I think it matters more than anything around something like this that everybody's against. And I mean, like, even during the COVID-19 conversation, to understand what gain of function was and how long, even the periods where it wasn't supposed to be happening and it was, which we'll cover again today, it's very obvious that everyone is involved from left to right, far back as you want to look, in since it's been possible. But we're also going to get into today an important overlap to the biometric surveillance discussion, but something that's been going on, I think, since around 2018, really got focused in 2022, but it's gotten taken a back seat for many reasons. But it's about I guess, a direction, a platform, something they're building out called HART, H-A-R-T. And it is a very alarming discussion that's been there for a while. But what I want to cover today is one that it's being given a jump start, a supercharge, as the article puts it. But in particular around why that's happening today, the XAI Palantir surveillance kind of just centralization that's going on in the most alarming way I've seen in my ever doing this. And now bringing this back into the fold and showing you what it's really always been about. As one of the people point to makes the argument that Maha itself was just an effort to get people to, a head fake, as the title points out, for something else, to get you to think this is going to happen, but then ultimately driving you into where we are now. And all I hope for is people that you're willing to ask these questions, that you're willing to consider the alternative, even if it goes against what you want or what you think is supposed to happen. And of course, we'll start with a nod to a great article Derek wrote that talks somewhat about this idea of doing your own research. Before we get into anything else, I wanted to make sure we shout this out to the Big Frog and Ryan at Big Frog and the great work they're doing there. They will be our only new t-shirt company once Truth Clothing, which they are on the decline, goes away. Now, they ultimately decided to wind down what they're doing. I think they're just kind of shifting in life where they want to go kind of away from the media sphere, at least with the shop. Still think they're, good terms is my point. There's no negativity there. It's really just that they decided to wind down the t-shirt shop. And so you can still get discounted t-shirts on there. The link is right at the top of the website. But the difference here is there's one of two things. This will be the place to go going forward. And we do have all the old different versions, some of them slightly different for obvious reasons. The point, though, is that this was where you can get them now, normal price, at least as this website will have them. And that will give TLAV and the TLAV platform the most support. Now, you can't get the discounted ones until they run out of them on Truth Clothing. That just doesn't help TLAV as much. Nonetheless, why not get the discounted versions while they're still there? But if you're looking to support us the most in regard to buying a t-shirt or supporting, this would be the way to go. And of course, we also have on here the ones we've been showing before, Question Everything and so on. But we also, and the Vagabond one, but also the ones we added on the other store, which is the Free Speech Absolutist t-shirt, the hierarchy enslaving you, as well as a Latin shirt that I think they just recently put on. And the stickers. The Latin shirt was the one we recently added. And basically the truth conquers all was what the Latin phrase was. And so this is a great place for you to support TLAV because it gets you something you can wear and so on. And I just wanted to shout that out as well because, we're definitely needing some support right now, more than we have in a long time. So I want to make sure you saw that. I also wanted to highlight the number again that we recently I recently restarted because since we've moved, I lost the number for the office. So this number I'll include. I've just added it to the contact page, which is 615-751-4115. It is on silence, but ultimately you can leave a message at the office and I will check that regularly if there's other ways you can't get a hold of me. And on that note, I know, guys, trust me, you guys reach out about the contact form and how it doesn't work. And half the time I don't even think I get them from you, or even my emails, the same thing. Yes, I'm just trying to find more ways to help you guys get in contact with me. And then to be fair and clear, there's sometimes people reach out that I don't respond for plenty of reasons. So don't think it's just always being missed. But if you want to reach us there, and really don't expect me to get back to you, there's a lot going on, but I might. And ultimately just leave me information if you think it's important or, words of encouragement. Also, oops. I had something else there. Did I just close that? Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, since we're talking about supports to start and Bitcoin seems to be doing well, here is our donation page for Bitcoin, either the QR code, which I recommend you don't use, or the actual numbers on there, which is public, which you guys can check. It's always been public for everyone to see. We really haven't got that much through here, so maybe you can change that. But at the top, you notice we have everything else too: Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, or Subscribestar, Cash App, just direct donate through the website, all sorts of stuff. Definitely could use your support. Now, ultimately starting on some updates, couple points I wanted you to see, or rather follow-ups that I wanted you to see from last show and so on. just in case you missed it, I mean, I found this to be monumentally important, and there's a lot of coverage. Dropsite News did amazing work on this. But just in case you hadn't seen how incredible this is, because I think a lot of people got kind of stopped short at the Signal discussion, and really the idea being sort of like, oops, they got caught using Signal chats, which was a part of it, I guess. But at least those are encrypted to some degree. And I don't, trust me, I don't think anything's really that private today. But it was more so about the second part of the story, which was they got hacked because Waltz was using an Israeli tech that basically archived the Signal messages and stored it in Israel. And then they got hacked. And it's those are two different stories. Well, they're the same story as far as I'm concerned, but those are two stories. And realize how insane it is that you they can't stop talking about national security half the time when they don't even mean that, when they're pointing at something they want to stop. In this case, you've got a person who is a wild Zionist who's literally using Israeli infiltration tech that allows the Israeli government to, it's run by Unit 8300 intelligence. And they are literally able to look at the internal dialogue of the White House. I wouldn't be surprised if they're all well aware of that, quite frankly. Nonetheless, the State Department revealed to be using Israeli intelligence-linked chat app involved in the Trump hack. It's just wild how how that story should be literally everywhere, and it's not. Now, Derek put out an amazing article today in defense of doing your own research. Now, this starts because, a lot of things have been going on around this topic for a long time. You can go back to the WikiLeaks point where I think it was Chris Cuomo that basically said, you're not allowed to look at this stuff. You need to look at us and we'll tell you what it says, paraphrasing. Which is just absolutely wild that he wasn't aware enough to be like, I'm never going to say that because that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But no, he did it because that's what they all do. But there's many other examples of this, right? We've talked about this during the COVID-19 timeframe, and they play this game where basically the idea that you're not allowed to do your own research because you're not smart enough to understand, which is usually the square one, as if you're not capable of learning things then and becoming better at what you do. No, just listen to what we tell you. But then the point they make in this back and forth that he covers is the ultimate point of like, well, you're allowed, you should be looking at information, but you have to, make sure you look to them. When the overarching point in all of this is that they act like you're somehow incapable of finding a middle ground, where you either go so far to one side where all research and doctors and everything official is completely fake, and I'm only going to look at what a blog says. I think I know few people in that field than anything else. I mean, anything else, whatever imaginary field that is. Most people are never of the mind that they're doing that. Now, they could accidentally be doing that, but they think they're looking to source. So this game they play where people are like choosing to just look at what the blog said and ignore any other data points, that does exist, but it is a minority in the conversation. The point is about people who get trapped in bad sources of information, and not just the blog, but like people that are looking into it, but they go with narratives versus, well-sourced information. The problem, though, the point is that most people, I argue, are doing their best to try to find their way through all this, and they ignore the fact that, yes, they can lie to you. That does happen, or they could be wrong, or they could be influenced by pharma or whatever else. And it's just, the thing is, it's almost childish that they must be aware of that very clear nuance. I think it comes down to the fact they just don't want you being able or willing to do your own research, and then also knowing new information that can clearly change the way you see things. Well-written, important article. One of the things he goes over, which is why one of the other reasons I wanted to highlight it, is about the AI overlap, which we're going to be talking about, I think, on a new panel coming up. But it's an interesting thought about people who are now just kind of outsourcing their investigation to an AI. Now, I've used it on this show, and I'll make a point about this in a second. But as always, as I say every time, it's not something that we're relying on. It is a secondary point, usually with Grok, to say, see, even your Grok says that, or to just back it up with something that's easy to point to, but never, ever from TLAV and I would argue anybody in the IMA, are we relying on that as the source. That's simply a secondary, like, what are the ages of the dates, or, and then confirming this independently, because AIs are wrong all the time. The problem is that people are being convinced, like with Google Maps, that they don't have to do this anymore. Ask a younger kid how to use a map. A lot of them are lost. And that's incredible. Or even just direction, knowing how to get around your own town. Half the time people are lost because they've outsourced that to something else. It's the same thing we've done with a lot of different technological advancements. So the conversation is twofold about whether or not this is, about trying to outsource that, or just simply people over relying on it or trusting that it is the truth. And then in a couple of different variations within that part, whether they're using that to lie to you. right? Inputting bad data and so on. It's a very interesting conversation. So we'll be talking about that soon. And again, I'll make a couple points about my framing of it today, about how it can be used. And I even made a point the other day about how I got frustrated that even using Grok as a counterpoint to try to show them that's I'm mad that I even got pulled into that. I'm very resistant to it all, but I know there are benefits to it. And so it's important to try to open, in the sense of counterbalance, even just rapid research, but always check what you're doing outside of, that should be with any source. Even if it's directly from a prime source, you should also confirm it with something else. Had a great interview with Brooke Jackson titled Meet the New Boss, same as the old boss. And that is basically exactly her sentiment in regard to, as she pointed on Twitter, Trump sides with Pfizer. So if you haven't seen it, I think it's really important to understand that this is not going in a positive direction, as I think we're aware with Stargate and MMR shots, and which we touch on in the show, or at the end of this interview, we touch on the gain of function because it happened that day. The executive order and where that goes, we'll go through that in detail today. But important to understand that she's very aware of where this is and very aware that current administration, the Trump DOJ, are siding with Pfizer. And they're saying that the shots are safe and effective. We'll make a couple points about that in this first segment. But on that note, I wanted to show you one quick thing that I showed her after the show. Very strange, actually. Well, I shouldn't say strange. It's actually very common, but it's interesting that while I was on the show with her, you could see here that I would load the page and it would go away. It would show that I wasn't following her. Now that sometimes happens, right? Where you click it and then but no, no matter what I did, no matter how many times I clicked it, no matter how many times I refreshed, it would always revert back to not following her. Now, I believe that's because of certain people. I think Brooke Jackson is somebody who is very inconvenient, made exponentially more problematic that she's not partisan, or at least willing to call out any side if they don't go along with what should be happening, what's the right thing, or acknowledging the monumental amount of evidence that she's produced, showing you that Pfizer and Ventavia and the U.S. government are aware. Her lawsuit right now is not against left or right or Ventavia or Pfizer. It's Brooke Jackson versus the U.S. government. She deserves a lot of respect and think of the courage for that. But anyway, I wanted to point that out because Twitter is absolutely still doing stuff like that. That shouldn't be new to anybody. Now, to talk about the gain of function point, because obviously this overlaps, right? Not only do we touch it in the interview, but guys, let's be real about this. Gain of function, do you realize that the entire dynamic that we're talking about, with the mRNA platform, what we're discussing, the way they got there is using gain of function. It's about manipulating the pathogen, whatever we're dealing with, to either, and technically, gain or loss, because there's loss of function too, but adding so it can be more infectious, spread longer, that kind of stuff. You can spread, to be able to last longer, or be aerosolized or airborne. Like, these are things that they have tried to do in the past, under the guise that they could find something worse and make a vaccine for it. And just in case, we've got that vaccine for something that 1 in a billion happens, where somebody out there in a cave makes exactly the thing that we just secretly made in our lab. It's insanely stupid, and people have called it out for the longest time. But the point is, it's built and built and built. And I'm going to play some clips for you. I'll play what they say right here. And I'll stop it a couple of times because you have to point out that they're wrong. Even what RFK Jr. says about when they didn't do gain of function until 2002. You can listen to Dr. David Martin, Dr. Francis Boyle. And you could look it up for yourself. That's simply not true. Now, they didn't publicly do this, but it's the same point we're going to make going through this, especially with the different terms they're using. As if somehow by saying, only the dangerous ones, or only the federally funded ones, or only ones in foreign areas. It's just another game. I certainly hope I'm wrong, but history shows us that we're not. And Trump's last administration was a part of this like anybody else. So let's play this first clip, and then we'll go over, I think, what the reality is of this. And I think the point that I'm making, just so it's clear, is that this is not actually what's happening. We'll go over the executive order itself, but here's Dr. Robert Malone. Finally, thank you, Mr. President. Children's Health Defense says historic breakthrough news. Trump ends gain of function research in the United States. Now, what's wild about that statement, one, he very clearly does not end it in any sense. I'll read it for you on the show. But to say in the U.S. is whether they didn't read it, or because the clear point is about foreign bad guy stuff, right? That's what it's not about the U.S. And I'll read it through you for myself. Read it. We'll read through it together. And so what I find so strange is that they either didn't read it or lying for. I don't know. I don't want to assume. I think people get a little bit excited about things they want to see. It's just about what you can prove and what's correct. So let's watch this clip first.
An historic day, the end of gain-of-function research funding by the federal government and also controls by private corporations on gain-of-function studies. This was the kind of study that was engaged in by the United States military and intelligence agencies beginning in 1947. By 1969, the CIA said that they had reached nuclear equivalency, that they could kill the entire U.S. population for 29 cents a person. That year, President Nixon went to Fort Detrick and announced a unilateral end to this kind of research.
Now, I know this is low, so I'll try not to jump in too much. Just remember, he's talking about Fort Detrick. He's talking about how long this has been going on. So just because realize how long people like us and others have been calling this stuff out during Trump's last administration, and they called you crazy. Donald Trump and the rest of they pushed back on this stuff. Okay, so as he's sitting there with this weird kind of non-interest with what's going on, ask yourself why it makes sense for them to then present this as something they're exposing when they've played a part in doing it. All of them have. Now, to the usual point, well, isn't it still good that they're doing? Yes, always. But as long as you're able to understand that people, it's like the murderer calling out people who were involved in the murder. And then you go, good, they called out the murderers, arrest them. But okay, what about the murderer? He's also a murderer. He's also part of the murder. How has that changed? Well, they called it out. Okay, so you're just invalidating their crimes too because they called out the others? I mean, you got to recognize how weird that is. And that's one part of it. Second is that we don't even really know that this is going to end up being what they claim it is, and I'll go through why. But you have to realize that this is a game, and we've caught them many times already doing this. So just remember that, how much they're all immersed in this.
They call dual-use research that was for vaccination and also for military purposes. He then persuaded over 180 countries to sign the Bioweapons Charter in 1973. That basically ended gain-of-function research around the globe until 2002.
That's insane. Like, you can do your own research as much as I recommend you do, as always. That's just absolutely insane. You can quite literally prove the U.S. government's been doing this pretty much I mean, this is Dr. Boyle made clear right in the beginning of this. But also the fact that around the world, are we serious? I just don't even know. I think this is about creating a very easy to digest narrative. And maybe he did say basically, so you can give him some air in the room and say, well, but I don't think it's about some fringe tiny minority, guys. I think you can clearly show that they did this to basically hide that ongoing research. That's my personal opinion. And I think you can go back. Well, I say that because there's parts of it that are up in the air, but let's be real. There is undeniable evidence that did happen. And that's why he didn't say completely, but I don't think it's a small fraction. I think it's actually the main discussion. You can ask, I mean, look, the reality is by kind of papering over that, it does kind of hide a lot of the ongoing awareness that they were aware of. And we were screaming about right in the beginning of the COVID-19 conversation, or well before that. Right. So realize all of this had been continuing. The funding of Chinese research happened during Trump's administration. And even when he stepped up to try to end the Wuhan lab, I keep telling you this, and I said it back then, he stopped that. But at the same time, there was like 4 other projects, or I think it was more than that were doing the exact same research that they didn't stop. So it's always been a shell game. It's always been a mirage. And this is what people like Dr. Martin and the rest will tell you, because they do not shy away from telling you that it is nonpartisan and they're all involved. Despite when he go on certain partisan shows, they do their best to frame it opposite. But if you listen to him, watch your interview, he's very clear. Trump, Biden, all of them, they're all involved.
Or 2001, after the anthrax attacks, we passed the Patriot Act, and the Patriot Act had a little-known provision in it, that said that although the Bioweapons Charter is still in effect, and the Geneva Convention is still in effect, U.S. federal officials who violate it cannot be prosecuted.
So in case you didn't hear that, he simply said that once the Patriot Act happened, after the anthrax attack, it totally had nothing to do with the gain of function, right? We're totally not even talking about the ongoing weaponization of anthrax that was tied back to Fort Detrick that happened before that, right? But 2002, after that, he's telling you, the Patriot Act added another area where it said what was exact framing?
Is still in effect, and the Geneva Convention is still in effect. U.S. federal officials who violate it cannot be prosecuted.
So basically, how do you even pass something like that? That, okay, so we'll just write this in that if we do it, it's not a crime. Yeah, that's pretty much the always go-to for the U.S. government. So it's not new. Trump's doing it right now. Very Nixon of him, right? If I do it, it's not a crime. It's kind of the old sentiment. I just realized that didn't really change other than just writing in. So what you can see, in my opinion, is the progression of the ongoing agenda that now becomes more and more important. So now they need to, and they get more corrupt and more brazen, and they write it in the Patriot Act because that was a wild time that they could just do whatever they want. And so again, they cannot be prosecuted for what I think you can prove they've always been doing. In case you missed me quickly saying that, the point of the anthrax attack, Whitney and I've talked about this. It's very clear that this was something that they were working on well before that. So the anthrax attack wasn't the impetus for why they did this, and then they started doing it. It was already going on. You could prove that. They made that. It tied back to Fort Detrick in the first place.
And that relaunched a bioweapons arms race, and that was driven by gain-of-function research. In 2014, 3 of those bugs escaped from U.S. labs, and President Obama declared a moratorium on future use, and instead,
which didn't stop, as I said last time, well before this, during COVID-19, they did that, and then it continued, and you can prove that. And it was well more than 3 bugs that got slipped out of Fort Detrick. We told you that many times in the past as well. So this is a very cultivated narrative, but it's easier to digest.
A lot of that research was moved offshore to the Wuhan lab.
Right. So the U.S. government moved its research over to Wuhan, right? And that continued all the way through Trump's administration. But just the only reason I'm saying that is for those that are trying to carve out one element. Understand my belief, and you can prove it, is that it's not left and right. It's all of it. It's the U.S. government. They've been doing this and handing the baton back and forth for a long time. That's the only reason I'm framing it like that. It's not partisan, but recognize that they continued this same dynamic. It's left and right. They're all doing the same thing. And now I argue the reason this is shifting, one, is because this is try to convince you that it's not happening anymore, even though it is, as well as the fact that I think they're on a different plane right now, like level with what they're working on. On top of that, I get the sense that something is actually coming. Like the way all these different points that have happened recently, it worries me that there is at least a narrative coming your way soon. We'll find out, I'm sure.
We have, and it launched bioweapons arms race all around the country, all around the world, so that China is engaged in it, developing all kinds of weapons using AI and CRISPR technologies that are really devastating. Russia,
exactly like they're doing right now. Don't miss how incredible that is, right? Literally using AI to manufacture it's the same exact thing. So let's be real. If we're talking about the Stargate program and we understand that the COVID-19 injection was a bioweapon conversation, then are we missing something? It's the same conversation. And CRISPR and the same thing. This is not a unique to China bad guy problem, guys. Just like most of the problems we've seen in the past, it originates here.
Deeply engaged in it, Iran and many other countries. It's a kind of weapon that always has blowback. There's always bad news. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just to be clear, it's a kind of weapon that always has blowback. Always, he says. So when we go next and prove to you that they're still doing that, make sense of that for me. If there's always blowback, then why wouldn't it be absolute no more gain of function? That we are literally stopping every single kind. We're making it illegal like they pretended they did before. It's a good question.
Justification for this kind of weaponry was, and these kind of research, was always that we have to do this to develop vaccines to counter a future pandemic.
He has expressed that that's stupid in the past. So it's funny that he frames it. Now he's telling you their narrative, but very clearly could have made it more specific to say that that's asinine, to argue that we're ever making an injection for something only we made secretly in a lab in case somebody else magically makes the same thing. The 1,000,000,000% chance. It's about you creating a dangerous thing that you have the antidote for, or not, or however you want to look at it.
In all of the history of gain-of-function research, we can't point to a single good thing that's come from it.
I agree with that. Okay, so if there hasn't been a single good thing, why is it still continuing? Despite the screaming narrative of the partisans who are wrong, it is continuing. So how do you make sense of that?
And today, I commend President Trump for his courage and his vision in ending U.S. bioweapons research.
Right, so he ends by saying that. He ends by saying, thanking him for ending this research. Okay, we'll go through it. Now, by the way, it does. Rumble's been having problems all day. It looks like it's up for me, but I almost wasn't able to get it to work today. So just heads up on there. You might want to check Odyssey or other channels we're using. So here is the first thing I posted when I just looked at the executive order for myself, like so few tend to do. As Kelly Neal says, I wish more of the Trump faithful looked beyond happy headlines and actually read these foolishly lauded executive orders. Quote, if wishes were horses, right? It says Tom Renz makes a valid point regarding the continuation of gain-of-function research. He's one of the few that call it out. Here was what I just said. So in regard to that post, I said, Children's Health Defense saying it ends gain of function in the U.S. I said, except that's not what happened. And I simply tagged this, which was Luther Cyrus saying the executive order includes provisions, by the way, because I looked into it as well, and it's clear, the gain of function research to continue in the United States under stricter oversight, or so they tell you. Like, look, yes, is stricter oversight a positive and small step? Well, I guess, but if it's like saying a better step in regard to the I'm trying to make gain of function, as he just said, has never yielded positive results. So why do we keep wanting it, but with harsher oversight? It doesn't logically make sense. That's why they then said he ended it. And I think that's in a very carefully constructed narrative, provided it adheres to new safety and transparency guidelines. Okay, so you're now going to be transparent and have guidelines for safety around the deadly bioweapon creating function. It emphasizes maintaining U.S. innovation and readiness against biological threats. So we're even using the same narrative that we need to make dangerous things to prepare for the dangerous things they might also make exactly the same way if they just happen to be psychic. They've made fun of these in the past in the same way. Now, the point is, it's not true. Thank you. Glad he was pointing this out early. And this is nod back to the point that Derek was making. So this is something we read through the executive order. We looked through the information. We checked with other people's opinions online. We looked at other experts, the whole field, all of which should be considered. And you can come to your conclusion about what the data shows, the evidence shows. And because someone is an expert, maybe you think that way. The point is, it's just data points that you should verify. Simple. The idea that a white lab coat somehow has more impact. Now, yes, they might have more insight in the conversation, so maybe you can read that first, but you compare the information and you look for yourself. So it's just so interesting how people tend to weight these things and ignore other information because they choose to, and that gets played against you. The point is, just because Grok says something does not make it so, but it's interesting. I point out that people tend to want to hear what it says more because they think it's a conservative thing. So it's worth using, but make sure you're checking out for yourself what the information shows. And I said, as usual, partisans are being manipulated. Here's what Grok says. And this is Luther asking this for a very clear reason, because they're all saying, it's a lie. RFK Jr. just said a whole speech yesterday. Okay. So this person says, you're wrong. RFK just told me this. See how this works? And Luther just goes, okay, Grok will gain of function research continue in the United States. And it says gain of function research in the U.S. is not fully banned, but faces stricter limits. Okay. Again, I'm not going to argue that maybe, like I said in the beginning, in case you didn't hear it, maybe this is a series of steps, which I already promise you is being argued online, whether they know that or not, because it's easier to feel that way. And maybe you're right, but you don't know because nobody's making that allegation that it's going to go incremental, right? Then we're going to a little bit more strict, and then next week it'll be a little bit more. And hey, you know what? If it ends, I will cheer it on. Until then, I will make the same point. Why would you keep using a deadly dangerous thing if you just told us it doesn't have any positive outcome? Sort of like Trump telling you the shots are safe and effective, or Brooke Jackson telling you and showing you with her own information that they're siding with Pfizer and telling you, the DOJ, that their information shows that you can't see that it's safe and effective. Still. Or MMR shots, or Stargate, or any number of things. But it goes on to explain the same thing we'll just read for you right now, that the executive order suspends federally funded, dangerous, even Grok points that out, gain of function research. Okay, so what if they deem it one that's not dangerous? These things matter. That's just a subjective term they used. So if they were going to make it about gain of function, they would have just used gain of function, not dangerous gain of function. I'll show you that point. But it goes on to say it ends funding for work in such countries like China. So the U.S. government funding gain of function research in China should be a huge issue, but they're just going to say, we're going to stop funding them. So basically your report is the U.S. government's going to stop doing all those things, but making it about China. I mean, they're just as problematic because they're all working on it, but think about how interesting that is. So again, just to save time, we'll jump to the actual order because he goes over all the stuff we're going to show you. Before we get there, this is just somebody else. Oh, this is the new Elon Musk, Grokland Rust. Apparently, because what's funny is if you do those things on Twitter, you get like this weird suspension time frame, and you can't, like, it's just, you're not them, because I guess you own it, you can do what you want. But he goes, this is great. No more funding research that kills millions of people. That's what he says. That's Elon Musk. The real name for gain of function is death maximization. That's what Fauci was actually researching. Think about what he just said. If you listen to him, if the information already shows you that they are continuing this, and he's telling you that they basically showing you exactly what we're talking about. So if what Elon is saying, which I agree with, is the case, then why would they continue it at all? And I said, except that's clearly not what's happening. Here's Grok telling you you're wrong, Elon Musk. But see, guys, I don't think these are accidents. I think they know that they're lying to you in very particular ways. I said, are you deliberately lying or just this easy to fool? Common sense is not so common, says they did not ban gain of function in funding in general. They just the federal funding. So Bill Gates can get USAID money, launder it, and then privately fund gain of function. It's all posturing and a joke, which is one of the many possible side steps because they didn't stop it. Or whatever money you want to talk about. Let's not forget, Gates met with Trump in the beginning of the administration more than once. They had great meetings. They talked about continuing the vaccine discussion, and then Stargate came out. Stop lying to yourself, guys. You know how obvious this is. And now Bread and Circus, by the way, points out the same thing, that executive order Trump signed. We're going to read it next. Just so I just want to give you the people that were highlighting this, which led to us going through more of the information. Sign does not even come close to banning gain of function. It bans funds going to China, but specifically says that it will continue in the U.S. with vague promises about increased safety. Okay, here's the actual executive order. We're not going to read all of it. You can read it all for yourself, and hopefully you will if you actually care about the truth. Right? If you're out there repeating narratives or statements online and you haven't read it, ask yourself why. Ask yourself why you don't feel stupid about that. Ask yourself why it's more important that the narrative of team sport politics is guiding the day as opposed to what's actually being stated. Improving the safety or security of biological research. So in the name, it makes it clear. Improving the safety and security, not stopping. It says the Biden administration, of course, this is how you start, right? Despite the fact that Donald Trump did every single thing that Biden did during his administration with this exact kind of research. He did. Look it up. We talked about it then. Biden administration allowed dangerous gain of function. That's likely all they need to read, right? If you're a team sport politics player and you read that, you go, get him, bad Democrat, Biden did it. They're winning. We did it. There are some people that's all they need right now, and that's been tailored. Biden administration allowed dangerous gain of function research within the United States with insufficient levels of oversight. So based on what we know, based on that this is now happening, then by that logic, so did Trump, which is true. But see, they don't say that. My point, as always, is not partisan, that they all did it, despite how weirdly that gets taken as attacking Trump, even though my point is Biden did it too. They're all doing it. It's also actively approved through the National Institutes of Health, federal life science research funding in China, and other countries where there is limited U.S. oversight or reasonable expectation of biosafety enforcement. So the whole thing they build into is that we're the ones that do the good stuff, right? The U.S. government, we're back in square one. I mean, we are way back in square one with this. We're going back to good guy, altruistic U.S. government doing all the right things, freedom and democracy. How long has it been since anybody actually believed that? But we're going back to it. Golden age, right? The idea is that we need to make sure that we're in control. So basically, they're enshrining the idea that we're going to keep doing it. They can't. And then getting their lackeys to go out and say, it's over, gain of function stopped. My administration will balance the prevention of catastrophic consequences with maintaining readiness. That's pandemic preparedness, guys. Remember all those buzzwords? Maintaining readiness against biological threats and driving global leadership in biotechnology, biological countermeasures. That's weapon stuff, guys. That is literally the military overlap that Destiny Resendez and plenty of others have been screaming about. And it's right there in front of you. Biosecurity and health research, biological countermeasures. First of all, guys, that's where you get into the back and forth of all this. That is about, you could pretend they mean vaccines, but that's the whole, or rather, therapeutics or whatever kind of game you want to play. What that means is exactly what we're talking about. They're working on these things to create some kind of antidote vaccine, whatever you want to call it. The point is, all of this is continuing to gain a function. It says, shall establish guidance for the heads of relevant agencies to the extent consistent with the terms and conditions of the funding to immediately, one, end federal funding of dangerous gain-of-function research conducted by foreign entities. Imagine reading that and pretending that means that we're stopping it forever. I mean, you've got three very clear terms there that don't apply to everything. Federal versus others, dangerous versus what they deem as not, and foreign entities. So very clearly, they're not even talking about the United States so far, and it doesn't. It makes it clear when you read that they're going to continue it. Or in other countries where there is not adequate oversight to ensure that the countries are compliant with the United States oversight. I mean, at this point, it's pretty obvious that the whole point is whether they apply the safety measures, not whether it stops. And it says, and federal funding of other life science research. Now, that's worth its own investigation, like what they feel that category truly applies to. But it's a whole dangerous overlapping conversation. Life science is, we get into this weird transhumanist direction. We've gone into it a lot. But that doesn't mean every part of it. Sure, there's parts of it you could argue are going to help people. That's usually something they bandy about in front of you and make you think that this is going to be all it's about. Neuralink in your arms, and clearly, it's just it's a part of it, and I argue not even the part they care about. But that's for you to decide. Then it says life science research that is occurring in countries of concern or foreign countries. So again, very clear about where we're talking about. There is not adequate oversight to ensure that the countries are compliant with, again, U.S. oversight standards and policies that could reasonably pose a threat to public safety and economic or national security, and determined by the heads of relevant agencies. That literally means anything, anywhere. If they decide to, make it into those categories, national security could mean just about whatever they want. Now, it says within 120 days of this order, the director of the OSTP, which was the Office of Science and Technology Policy, pursuant to a specific code and in coordination with the APNSA and the heads of relevant agencies, shall revise or replace the 2024 United States government policy for oversight of dual-use research of concern and pathogens with enhanced pandemic potential. I mean, how many more examples do we need? I don't even keep reading. I mean, so we're changing the dual use, which is the whole thing we always talk about. Dual use is weapons. That's what the term means. Weapons, but also positive. It can vaccinate you or you can kill you. And since we're even making that point, one of the specific shows I did was on exactly that, as I've referenced before. Dual use. That's an MIT study. New aerosolized mRNA delivering nanoparticles can vaccinate or they can eliminate. That's their discussion, by the way. I'll include that. And we've done many of them on this topic. And this was 2023. Now, the point, where was it? Yeah, so they're changing the dual use part of it to a title that is to strengthen top-down independent oversight. Where was it? To replace 2024 with... Wait, where was that? Well, I'll just keep reading. The point is that they're replacing it and with the same direction. It says strengthen top-down independent oversight, increase accountability through enforcement. So if it doesn't exist, there's nothing to enforce or have accountable. And improve public transparency and clearly define the scope of covered research while ensuring the United States remains the global leader in biotechnology, biological countermeasures, and health research. So it's gone from we don't do it to now we're going to lead the world in this exact field safely. With oversight. It's almost insane how easy it is to play people right now. Now, that's let's put it this way. I don't know whether everyone's falling for it or not. I don't even know how we can tell. My gut tells me that people are not stupid enough to fall for this, and the only ones that are screaming about it are the ones that don't care or are involved for the wrong reasons. Most people can read these things. I think they care, and if they, eventually, whether they go along with the headline or not, I think at the end of the day, this is going to be clear. It's not ending. It's in fact seems they're going to be going even harder. Now it says incorporate enforcement mechanisms, including those described in Section 7 of this order, into federal funding agreements to ensure compliance with all federal policies governing dangerous gain-of-function research. So they even use the term dangerous gain-of-function and make it clear they're going to do that. Let me read that again. Incorporate enforcement mechanisms, including those described in this section above, into federal funding agreements to ensure compliance with all federal policies governing dangerous gain-of-function research. So how do you read that without realizing or acknowledging that they're not stopping this? They're just making sure that that's all the enforcement mechanisms are in compliance and ensure that they meet all federal policies for dangerous gain-of-function research. So that might have been a mistake. I don't know. Nonetheless, we can see it's not stopping. Just want the dangerous part I think is interesting. Provide for review and revision at least every 4 years. So it's going to keep going. Within 180 days of the date of this order, develop and implement a strategy to govern, limit, and track dangerous gain-of-function research across the United States that occurs within federal funding and other life science research that could cause significant societal consequences. So the point, again, to make it even more clear, is they're not stopping this in the United States. They're going to track and monitor even the ones they call dangerous. Continue reading this, guys. It's very clear. It's actually we're in a special time right now, I think, where I've never been. It's actually pretty striking to see how easy it is to fool some people right now. I think more than ever. I think we're in a very dangerous kind of technocratic, social engineered time frame where people are kind of losing it. Like it's the same point about not knowing the majority. Where do you look for stuff like that? People get frustrated with that and they fall back into what they know. That's not even a knock on people. They've used our own ways. They've used ourselves against ourselves. Let's put it that way. But it says, ensure that the revised policy called for in section 4A of this order includes a mechanism whereby research institutions that receive federal funding must report dangerous gain-of-function research, and to the maximum extent permitted by law, include research that is supported by non-federal funding mechanisms. I just don't know how much more clear that can get. Then, of course, under definitions, dangerous gain-of-function research means scientific research on an infectious agent or toxin with the potential to cause disease by enhancing its pathogenicity or increasing its transmissibility. So that's literally what they're going to do. You can read this document for yourself. So just to be clear, dangerous gain-of-function research, even the word dangerous, only applies and stops to people they don't want to do it over in the world. So basically, they want to be able to build up weapons and bio stuff. They can't do it. But they're not going to listen. So what does China care what the U.S. tells them they can or can't do? So this is a facade. Quite frankly, might as well be all of them together. If we understand how things happened during COVID-19, I wouldn't dismiss that possibility. Disrupting beneficial immunological response or the effectiveness of an immunization agent agent or toxin. This was discussions of research activities are those that could result in significant consequences, and one of them being disrupting beneficial immunological response or the effectiveness of one of the things they're giving against an agent. So I thought that was interesting, only because the basic point, let's just say it's a COVID shot, right? And we know the COVID shot is killing people, and you try to give them something that might stop that. They're saying right there that now you're the one doing dangerous. You're the one that is going to be held accountable because, it's an abstract thought, but I just thought that stood out to me in the way that, if they are doing this, which I think we can see, it comes down to a point of whether you might try to stop that in some way. And now they've written down that if you do that, you're breaking the law. But those are all side points. How do we misunderstand this? How do we get to a point to where people say, oh, it's this one here. How do we get to a point to where people literally say that it's ending gain of function? No more research that kills millions of people. I mean, it literally says the opposite. Now, here is Dr. David Martin. I have a few clips I want to play you. This one is it's a post by Maria Siderholm, and it's talking about December 17, when Trump was in office. Here's what he has to say.
Thank Dr. Zhengli Shi of the Wuhan Institute of Virology for access to the BAT-CoV sequences and the plasma Wuhan Institute of Virology virus 1 spike protein. She sent it to us, and then we built the weapon in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Now, why is that important? And why is it important that we have this precise conversation? That is because the Department of Energy actually did the politically astute thing. And this is really cool. When they came up with what they called a low confidence interval, that this was a lab leak from Wuhan, they came up with that because they know the answer. The answer is this wasn't a lab leak from Wuhan. Was the Wuhan Institute of Virology involved? Absolutely. But what you'll see in all of the documentation, including the recent passed bill in Congress, is nobody's bothered to include North Carolina in that list. Nobody's bothered to include Ralph Baric in that list. And he's the one who actually said in 2015, during the gain of function moratorium, that the Wuhan Institute of Virology spike protein was poised for human emergence. He's the one that said the bomb was loaded and delivered. But we're not asking the question, hey, is he under investigation? Is UNC Chapel Hill under investigation? Is Anthony Fauci under investigation? And Robert Redfield, as recently as just last week, said without equivocation, U.S. taxpayers paid for the development of this pathogen. He didn't hide that at all. And this is the CDC director saying, we did it. And you know what? It's like saying aliens exist. You know, people can hear it and they just go, oh, I must have misheard that. It must be Wuhan. And then they go back and do the stupid Wuhan investigation. Listen, if we're serious about this, what we need to do is we need to go to UNC Chapel Hill and we need to arrest the people who are perpetrating this particular crime.
Right.
We need to go to DC and arrest Fauci for perpetrating this crime. And we need to go to wherever Dashik is hiding and arrest him because they're the ones that admitted to the crime in public.
Yep. And that's David Martin with Kim Iverson in the interview there. But you realize what we're talking about, right? I mean, so isn't that what we were promised? Why isn't Fauci or Barrick or the rest of them in prison right now? We know all of this, guys. This is not new. Or what about anybody but a Tesla vandal or somebody screaming at a Jewish person in the street? Like, is there anybody? Where is the actual accountability? All the promises of arrests or all the claims of people lying and stealing money and all these different things we've heard since the beginning, and not a single person is being arrested for any of it. Doesn't that bother people who actually pretend accountability is coming? It damn well should. December 2017, when Trump was in office, NIH lifted the funding pause dating back to October 2014. This is from the NIH, December 2017. So it's funny how RFK Jr. just casually skipped over that part of the story. Don't you find that telling? NIH lifts funding pause of gain of function during Donald Trump's administration right up into COVID-19 timeframe. These things should certainly matter to sleuths out there trying to figure all this out, right? And by the way, I'll include this. This is Ralph Barrick's curriculum that David Martin and I discussed on our interview, but this is something that's been going around a while. This is the one that I always like to show. And I've done two shows on this. Here's one of his research discussions from 1990. Coronavirus-induced myocarditis in rabbits. Look at that. Almost like that's our coronavirus-induced myocarditis in rabbits right there, even before, back in 1987. Almost like they're working on how to use that, one of the different things. Now, you could argue about any number of ways about, that doesn't exist and so on. It doesn't change the fact that they wrote down they were working on it. So that's the only point that really matters. And I think it's worth considering whether they were literally doing exactly that. There it is. Might as well include these. There's Ralph Barrick right there. U.S. funded research on coronavirus-induced myocarditis. That's where we include that link. And I followed it up. Did the U.S. government work on a myocarditis-inducing virus? The answer is yes. Then work to aerosolize it? Also yes, in the case of China. All of this during the overlap of multiple left and right administrations, which passed through Trump. And, well, technically, the tail end of this research was before both Trump and Biden, I argue. But the point is they continued all of this through other people's work well through both of them. Now here is the next clip. Now the point on this, guys, is just to remember that Trump lifted this. That led right up to where we are. But it's not only about Trump. It's about the continuation of all of them doing the same thing right up until now. Dr. Francis Boyle, he drafted the Biowarfare Act that they still use, has been saying this and ringing this bell since the moment he saw this come down. Here's what he was saying. And I believe this is an interview with the... Oh, never mind. I thought it was a different platform. Either way, just listen to what he has to say.
Later on, I pointed out that the COVID-19 was also developed at the University of North Carolina, BSL-3, by Ralph Barrick, working with the Chinese bat queen from the Wuhan BSL-4. In addition, involved there at the UNC BSL-3 was Fort Detrick itself. Also, to get to your point on the vaccines, Colonel, the Food and Drug Administration was involved in the development of COVID-19, the offensive biological warfare weapon. And today, as we speak, Colonel, it has been the Food and Drug Administration that has approved all these COVID-19 vaccines. So they helped develop the weapon, and now they are approving these so-called vaccines. As for the vaccines themselves, I'm not part of any anti-vax movement. I call them Frankenshots. To distinguish them, there are some legitimate vaccines out there, but I call these things Frankenshots. It was the Pentagon Defense Advanced Research Program Agency that envisioned and funded this mRNA technology that is behind all these Frankenshots. So they have us coming and going, Colonel. These mRNA, they give you particles of COVID-19 that get injected into your body. They are injecting into your body particles of an offensive biological warfare weapon with gain-of-function properties being injected into your body. And that is why
Dr. Boyle has been on this from the beginning. Now, I think it's important to highlight as well. It's funny, I was just trying to search for it because it's something that's pretty, this is just interesting to me how this comes up. So don't forget, on top of everything else we've talked about, that Donald Trump gave Fauci a medal on the way out. Then, you wonder why he's not being arrested. Now, here's Snopes, and of course, even they go, yep, true. Of course, what's funny is you can easily prove this. Nonetheless, it's interesting how it gets very little conversation. Here's our interview with Dr. David Martin. Very much worth your time. I find him to be a very, very insightful and nonpartisan, objective person. I'll play a couple of things from this I think are important for you to hear. Now, actually, I think I've got a few videos I want to play from this time frame before we continue on some of this stuff. Now, one of them, well, actually, two of them technically are around the conversation of gain of function. One of them is from the last Trump administration. One of them is from the Biden administration. I think they're both relevant to hear. First, about Dr. David Martin.
I've been doing this now for 20 years. And one of the things I find frustrating is people pretend like there's this whodunit kind of gumshoes sleuthing required to go through and find all the stuff that's the evidence. It doesn't actually take any creativity or effort. This thing was done in plain sight. It was engineered in plain sight. It was publicly announced. By 2016, we even knew that it was the Wuhan variant that was the one that they had chosen. There's nothing left to the imagination. We knew that it was WIV1 poised for human emergence, right? This is not I wonder if it could be a bat and a pangolin going into a bar in Wuhan one night and getting it on and boom, out comes baby COVID. No, we knew in 2016 that the Wuhan Institute of Virology Virus 1 model was the one that they had selected for the weapon. And so, you sit back and you say, well, how is it that in the face of such egregiously public information, we still are asking questions about motivation, about whether this was from nature or whatever it is? Listen, people, they said in their own words, this was to hype a drug to get the public to accept something that without terror, the public would have never agreed to. Mm-hmm. That's their words, not mine. Mm-hmm. And when you have a world in which, as you have on the screen right now, they actually stated outright biohacking, synthetic coronaviruses, biological warfare enabling technologies, you don't have to interpret that. That doesn't require some spin. When you say biological warfare enabling technology, you are not talking about something that is an innocent oops, who could have known, who could have seen. It is actually a declaration of war against humanity, and we have it in black and white.
One of the many, and here it is again. This is the same document I was showing you. 57, synthetic coronaviruses, 2005, biohacking, biological warfare enabling technologies. Now, again, you guys, it doesn't have to be that you believe this. This could have all been built towards something they failed at, or, however you want to look at it. Just recognize how much he's right. I love the way he says that, egregiously public information. And they always get you driving, jumping down tangential holes that maybe are relevant, but let's not miss the forest for the trees, like every single time. That's something I can't stop noticing in the last so many years on overdrive. Like, like Lahaina or anything else, where there's very valid things to be diving into. And nothing we should be dismissing, guys. Anything, no matter how ridiculous it may sound, it's worth your consideration to make, who knows? Anything is possible. The point is that as we investigate some of the more abstract theories, let's make sure we're not missing the straight up criminality that is right in front of you, whether it's the government trying to seize land for, or any number of these conversations. That happens every time. And then we get pulled into, which again, you shouldn't be dismissing. You should consider conversations of other things that, like direct energy weapon conversation. I was the one out of everybody in that conversation that first highlighted, as far as I could tell. I didn't see anybody else talking about it. And it became a conversation once we put it out there, but certainly it's possible somebody else said it somewhere about the Direct Energy Directorate that was on Maui. Now, my point was that's interesting. Not that that proves necessarily anything, but I'm like, wow, that's an interesting overlap. Let's keep investigating this and find. And, the whole thing is it's spun out into something much more crazy, which is still something worth your consideration. But because of the partisan game, people like Nick Sorter, for example, who abused that situation and got donations from lots of people and then stayed at high fancy hotels, which he got called out for by his own audience. The point is that is how these games get distracted. And we start jumping at blue roofs and people like Stu Peters who lie to you about the color of Oprah's roof, for example. We get pulled into it. So my point is, think about the obviousness of this and what we're dealing with and how much you can literally prove that they got caught lying, even at the most core value of this, that people were being hurt and they covered it up instead of starting with the more abstract dynamics that are impossible to prove. We have them on these things. And that's why David Martin got so frustrated about this, because it was right there. It was literally right in front of you, and they used partisanship to get you jumping at shadow. Well, let's just even put it this way, jumping at things that were not the most immediate thing that you could prove. And some of those were shadows. Others, I think, were valid. Very interesting. Now, another video that I think I started with just to play this, because this is something he was very explicit about, and this overlaps with the Trump administration, because that's what he's saying about this. Because remember, when this started, I was on the tail end of the 2017 reversal of the gain of function point during Trump's administration, and then the vaping thing, the different nursing homes, the ground glass opacity, Fort Detrick leak, the military Wuhan games, and then Biden takes over.
We should be having a public dialogue, and it should be something that rises to the level of legislation. We should not allow the National Institutes of Health or the Department of Defense to allocate funding to amplify these agents so that allegedly we can study them in the case that they fall into the hands of bad people. Because the evidence has shown us that the bad people who actually have unleashed these pathogens since 1991, and by the way, if you go to miscellaneous Memorandum 7 and other documents, we can go back to the 1950s. The bad people who unleash these things on the population are us. It is the U.S. who's doing it.
Now, again, I always take issue with the us, right? He means the government, and we're not the government, but that's the point he's making, is that it was the U.S. government, all of it. Now, before we go on to some other points, it's interesting to me to play this out. Now, one of them is about, and this is the other one point I didn't make during all of that, is the executive order, was that what if they just call it something else? It's the same thing I said about Tennessee and the, stop spraying our skies discussion, which I still think is a positive step, but it didn't stop it because, as even Catherine would point out, they can simply spray at higher or lower levels. They can call it something else. There's ways, and you look up, I see it every single day. But at least it's being discussed, but it's still not I didn't stop it. So we shouldn't act like these, this is the same point here, is that clearly EPPP is something they've floated now. And if you look up the difference, there is a nuance to it, at least as they've carved it out. So now that they're not using the EPPP in the executive order, what does that mean? Does that mean they can do that still? Is it only these ones? And of course, dangerous becomes this category they can define all their own. Or how about the larger point of executive orders only applying to the executive branch? And so it technically doesn't even make sense for him to do this and claim it has any effect on foreign governments. But yeah, because, the adults in the room and the partisan teams for politics don't say that, so I must be the crazy one, despite the fact that it's the most embarrassingly obvious part of this whole executive order ploy. It's not going to do anything. Many of the ones that are having the most praise aren't actually ever going to see any light of day in the real sense because it was made to be stopped. Catherine made this point right in the beginning. The way they're going about these changes guarantee that they won't stay. And I think that's by design. Frustrating. But this point is about Rand Paul going back and forth with Dr. Fauci, and it's about this exact point. I think it's worth considering and hearing these arguments as we kind of just stumble into the same realm yet again.
Dr. Fauci, do you still support funding of the NIH funding of the lab in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, with all due respect, you are entirely and completely incorrect that the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain of function research.
Isn't that lovely? Just so it's clear, guys, there is literally nobody other than he lied. Okay. He lied really bombastically. This is during Trump's administration. They gave him a medal and sent him on his way. Okay. This guy's never even flirted with going to jail. You have to think about how wild that is. The point is that he's acting like it didn't even happen at this point. So why are we thinking it's any different now?
In the Wuhan Institute
Do they fund
of
Dr.
Virology.
Barrick?
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrick's gain of function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain of function research.
Oh, you mean coronavirus inducing myocarditis doesn't not gain function? Because I want to be clear again. You have to understand, Fauci literally knows he's lying right here, which just has to show you something.
And if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina.
You don't think inserting
China.
a bat virus spike protein that he got from the Wuhan Institute into the SARS virus is gain of function?
That is
you would
not
be in the minority because at least 200 scientists have signed a statement from the Cambridge Working Group saying that it is gain of function.
Well, it is not. And if you look at the grant and you look at the progress reports, it is not gain of function, despite the fact that people tweet that.
So do
write
you still
about it.
support sending money to the Wuhan Virology Institute?
Before he answers that, I mean, this is the frustrating game that you're still seeing today. That's how politics works. The nuance with, the El Salvador and Garcia and the word facilitate. They make these ridiculous game nuances and they stretch it out forever until nothing happens. Okay, fine. Forget the word gain of function, Fauci. Are you doing things that cause this to happen, right? Or was this a part of the, yes is the obvious answer. You can call it whatever you want and pretend like because of some definition nuance that it doesn't apply to the term. It still is the problem that we're all highlighting. But people get mired in these very small nuances for obvious reasons. They do that to make you miss the bigger picture.
We do not send money now to the Wuhan
Do you
Virology
support
Institute.
sending money? We did under your tutelage. We were sending it through EcoHealth. It was a
Your
sub-agency.
testimony. You didn't give money to the Wuhan lab to do gain of function research.
That is correct.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain of function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. So
literally everybody involved with the gain of function stood up and said it's definitely not gain of function.
finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans.
Right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly.
And then it just doubles down on his righteous indignation. Very interesting. So here is a clip in 2020. It's 23, I think. Either way, it's with Kirby and in Biden's administration. Now, just recognize it didn't even slow down, okay? And the point is that in that time frame, Kirby acts like he doesn't even know what we're talking about. So I want it to be clear is how clearly this is just a can being kicked down the road. And now not only are they not stopping it, as we just showed you in the executive order, it seems as if they're going to become the leader in the world in this field as long as they stop the bad guys in the world from doing what they are the ones that they've always been doing.
Origin of the virus, you've made clear that there's no consensus. Does the president believe, though, that the reward outweighs the risk when it comes to gain of function research?
Does the reward outweigh the risk when it comes to gain of
That type
I
of
got
research
a
is pretty.
history degree. You're going to have to say that again.
Really, really bad acting by Kirby. That was a very simple sentence, and the words are all very well known, especially to someone in his position. But they want to act like, what do you mean? What is that word? Not working.
Does the president believe that this type of gain of function research is proven?
He believes that it's important to help prevent future pandemics.
Oh, okay. So exactly the same line of Donald Trump. Okay. So if you support this current Trump, then you support, if you support this current Trump direction, then you also support Biden. Hope that makes you uncomfortable.
Which means he understands that there has to be legitimate scientific research into the sources or potential sources of pandemics so that we understand it, so that we can prevent them, and we can prevent them from happening, obviously. But he also believes, and this is why he wants the whole of government effort here to understand it, that research has to be done, it must be done in a safe and secure manner, and as transparent as possible to the rest of the world, so that so people know what's going on.
Exactly.
I think that's a fancy way of saying yes.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. So Kirby agrees with Trump. All right. So Kirby and Biden's administration are we're doing exactly what Trump is doing now. So they're on the same page. Again, that needs to be clear. I'm sure you can go out of your way to try to find some small nuance different, or at least in narrative, by the way. In practice, it is exact. You know why? Because the rest of the narrative is all just ever changing. The function has never stopped. That's the point. Going forward, 5 times August says, I'm just saying maybe there probably wouldn't be so much infighting and drama amongst MAHA and the medical freedom community if it didn't feel like the mRNA poisons and COVID era blunders were being intentionally swept under the rug. He said that today. Now he's kind of being sarcastic. He's been calling this out incredibly. So what's funny to me is that, people like the Hodges brothers, for example, make the point like, well, there's a psyop trying to divide MAGA. My point's like, no, there's no psyop. I mean, sure, probably is in every context all the time. But my point is, you don't need a psyop to divide these people, okay? Some of them just aren't stupid. They're not falling for the obvious lies because they can literally read the order that says the opposite of what everyone's cheering on. So you don't need the psyop. You just need people that pay attention. And that goes to left and right, guys. It's how partisanship works. Stinson Norwood says, day 110, the Trump-Vance administration is still pushing COVID-19 shots for toddlers, which they are, and you can look it up on their own website. CDC. Didn't we get told? Didn't he claim that he was going to pull that off the schedule? The schedule was going to change? No, it seems to be the same. It seems to be getting worse. They're still advertising these shots. They're still letting them take these shots. Now they're promoting MMR. They're doing Stargate. They have essentially hundreds of mRNA shots in the works right now, from Moderna to Pfizer to CureVac. It's all Mary Bowden, MD, just pointed that out. It's all on overdrive, but his point is correct. It's clearly they're not doing what the promise was. Here is, weirdly enough, Brett Weinstein saying it says Brett Weinstein just made something clear on the Tucker Carlson show. President Trump is the reason the COVID shot is still being recommended for kids. He says, quote, I believe it could be done effectively instantaneously. You don't need to say, I believe. It literally could. I mean, even if in a common normal sense, yes, they could make that happen. But what's funny is with this sort of King Trump mentality that they have about he got a majority, he had a mandate, so they could just do whatever you want. That's not how that works. Well, by your logic, then why wouldn't that be yanked? Well, there's a process, Ryan. It's going to take 4 years. Funny how that doesn't apply when it's what you think you should want. What's crazy, though, I don't trust these people. I have a lot of reason not to. My point, though, is that even he seems to be calling out Trump for being the central reason. Because, guys, whether it's RFK or Trump or whatever else, the point is not that you have to blame somebody. You should. But the point is, it is still being given. All of this mental gymnastics to make sense of it. This was a core promise, like the core promise from at least MAHA. And nope, it's still there. Interestingly enough, here's what Nicole Shanahan said on the 7th. Now, it was in response or captioned what Dr. Suzanne Humphrey said in response to the Children's Health Defense, which said, President Trump nominates Dr. Casey Means to be the next U.S. Surgeon General. We'll talk about that briefly in 1 second. Some very weird internal infighting amongst the MAHA conservative kind of Trump MAGA discussion. Dr. Suzanne says, Dr. Jack Kruse, I think it's Kruse, Kraus or Cruz tried to tell us. Mary Talley Bowden. I keep saying Bowden, but I want to put a D in her name for some reason. And I respect her work. She's one of the few who has been consistent, objective, at least nonpartisan, and calling people out for what they're doing. I make sure you follow her. Dr. Mary Talley Bowen was on the podcast too. The point is, a lot of us, and yes, both of them, were screaming about this. And that's why I think Dr. David Icke and a lot of them saying, look, I'm done with this. Even going after Jimmy Dore, for example, and plenty of others that are like, look, I'm tired of this game where people are now calling it out when we were showing you then and you called us black-pilled. You know, and some of them were very quick to recognize the problem and called it out. And I actually will give one small, what Jimmy Dore said on his discussion was that, look, and it's actually, I said this made sense at the time, that Donald Trump has been committing genocide. We can all see that. So we can't reward that by leaning in, or rather the other way around. Biden has been committing genocide the whole time in Gaza. We can see that, right? So the whole point was we can't reward that by supporting the next Democrat administration. So we'll go with Trump. And if he does it, then we'll call him out. And I'm like, well, I think we all know what's going to happen, my opinion. But at least the logic was it made sense. But nonetheless, I still called it out too. But that was just worth giving you the nuance there because he did quickly call him out when it continued. The point is that far too many people were calling you crazy, black pill, lunatic, and then most of them are now at least somewhat calling out some of the problems without really acknowledging that this was exactly what you could have seen, that we were proving that was going to happen. So he said, or she goes on to say, she knows the deal with means. Let's see how it all pans out. I can't help but think this is a very carefully groomed and selected person in regard to the Surgeon General. Just about no clinical experience. Talks a great game about everything but vaccines. Feels all wrong. Why? There are so many better choices. Well, might as well, I'm not sure what this, I haven't seen it, but look, Dr. Henry Eli says, if you want a woman that believes in 24-hour metabolic surveillance by AI and who has no tangible clinical experience and whose family has ties to the Rockefellers and who was a silent as a church mouse in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, who has ties to WEF, Gavi, Biden, Clinton, and who, then this is a MAGA Maha pick from heaven. Wow. And I don't disagree with any of that, by the way. He just really nailed it with, here, let me keep that one for you. Oh, actually, I already tagged it. So here is what Nicole Shanahan said. Now, this is actually really important. Don't forget, she was the vice president running, if RFK would be elected, she would have been the vice president. She says, yes, in regard to in response to Dr. Susan Humphreys. Yes, it's very strange. Doesn't make any sense. I was promised that if I supported RFK Jr. in his Senate confirmation, that neither of these siblings would be working under HHS or in an appointment, and that people much more qualified would be. I don't know if RFK very clearly lied to me or what is going on. This is a scathing statement because she's lost faith, it seems. It has been clear in recent conversations that he is reporting to someone regularly who is controlling his decisions, and it isn't President Trump. Wow, that's a crazy thing to say. And with regards to the siblings, there is something very artificial and aggressive about them, almost like they were bred and raised Manchurian assets. Seems like everyone's become a conspiracy theorist. About effing time. Not to say that every possible crazy thing is true, but the fact that we're finally now considering that things like this, whether facetious or not, like, yes, of course that's possible. Or maybe just they're corrupt, but that's incredible, isn't it? That's a very, very large statement from somebody with a lot of influence who was towing the Maha line until very recently. Bryce Lipscomb, not familiar with his work. I do follow him, but I'm not super familiar. You know what? I take it back. I followed him after this. I'm just remembering that now. I was reading this one. I want to see what this guy continues to put out, but not familiar with his work. 70,000 followers. Says, yes, I have gradually lost my support for Senator Kennedy and completely lost trust in the Maha movement. Now, it depends on how you mean that. My opinion is the movement, it's like any of these movements, they get co-opted immediately, if not from the very beginning. Don't lose faith in or rather interest or support in the Maha mentality, the idea of let's make this place healthy again. Let's get rid of the dangerous injections. Let's get seed oils out of our food. Like, these things are obviously correct, I believe anyway. I just don't think that was what these people really wanted, or whether Kennedy did it at first or not. Something has clearly changed. But it goes on to say, I was blind during the Kennedy 24 campaign, seeing its idealism and populism as a promising path forward. In truth, it was a collection of unrealistic promises. Now, maybe, right? I mean, we shouldn't pretend like wanting all of those things is unrealistic. We just want I mean, whether we need no government and go to some society where we'd actually be happy, or realizing we would need at least somebody who might actually care about these things, or maybe not compromise if they do. It says, additionally, the campaign was heavily composed of leftists and progressives. It was in the beginning, for sure. I worked hard to bring conservatives on board, but was met with suspicion and accused of being a Trump plant by Kennedy left. Now, that was the interesting time when he joined Trump, and then he kind of pulled over whoever, which I think was the plan, whoever was willing to work alongside somebody on the other side. Progressivism and populism are foolish ideologies, he says. You could decide if you think that's true. The best thing to come from the campaign was Nicole Shanahan. Mary Talley Bowen says it turned into quite a mess. So a lot of people are starting to call this stuff out. Here's Mary Talley Bowen, MD. The new Surgeon General has never called for the COVID shots to be pulled off the market. That's why she was picked. That's her opinion, but think about that. Seems to be in line with the direction right now. Gain of function, Stargate, MMR. Guys, it's everywhere. Bird flu. What's like always forget it right in the moment when I'm trying to say it. Like right just out of the title. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss, is what that exactly is talking about. She goes, I know the other front runner well, who was not picked because of this issue. Kennedy is powerless. Now, I get frustrated with that. Everyone seems to want to, what certainly could be, or he's not what he seems to be, which is obviously one of the possibilities. Now, even I would argue it seems less likely to me. I don't know how I said many times you factor in all the time that was spent before this, but it's possible. So I'm frustrated that people continue to give that sort of assuming it's blackmail, assuming that he's being pressured, assuming that he knows, but I know him, he wouldn't do that. Well, you do know them, some of the people, so you probably know better than me, but you have to, at least, we can't stop knowing that online. Like that, he is being blackmailed, or, after the whole, by the way, the whole weird Ian Carroll overlap after that. Remember how weird that was? Candace puts out a video that wasn't even really about it exactly, and he makes it into this is absolutely going to change everything forever, which kicks off this whole he's being blackmailed argument, even though nothing in that even proved remotely it was happening. Now, again, I feel it's almost likely, but I don't have any evidence, so I'm not going to say that I know that. So it's a weird thing. But since then, that seems to be the go-to argument, as opposed to considering whether he may just not, maybe, or whether he was never that person, which is possible. I don't think that's the case. Or maybe he has been motivated for other reasons. Money, influence, which again, doesn't line up for me, but you can't ignore these possibilities. Here's what Kennedy said. The absurd attacks on Casey Means reveal just how far off course our healthcare conversations have veered, and how badly entrenched interests, including big food and the industry-funded social media gurus, are terrified of change. Well, interesting way to start framing that, seeing as how there's very valid concerns. And nobody's acting like these are hypothetical conspiracy theories. They're listing off very provable facts that I think are very concerning to people in the Maha movement. So I find that strange. Casey has excelled in every endeavor she has undertaken, which is not to say that she's the ones that we care about. She was president of her Stanford undergrad class, was a standout at Stanford Medical School, was a top performer in surgical residencies. So far, again, those things matter, but being an expert does not necessarily mean you're honest or care about the same things we do. She had the courage to leave traditional medicine behind. She realized her patients were getting better. Oh, by the way, interesting. Like Loomer, for example, is from a different angle, attacking her for having some weird esoteric belief about, it's so weird how when I think it becomes the core point, whether it's about Zionism, technocracy, or vaccine, the people like her muddy the water with things that may not be irrelevant to you, but seem to be going, look over there. I just find it interesting. But that's irrelevant at the point right now. It goes on to say the attack that Casey is unqualified because she left the medical system completely missed the point of what we're trying to accomplish with Maha. Now, I agree with that, actually. It shouldn't be that alone is not reason to say that she's not qualified if maybe we want something different, right? But that's not the point they're making. Casey is the perfect choice for Surgeon General precisely because she left traditional Western medical system. I would agree with that. Not that that proves she's the right choice, but that's something that gives me the indication she's open to different things. Her leadership has inspired many doctors to reform the system and forge a new path away from sick care. And it says, after leaving traditional medicine, Casey started a company and wrote a New York Times bestselling book that empowered patients and helped launch the Maha movement. This ability of Casey's to inspire Americans to rethink our healthcare system is also an existential threat to the status quo interests, which profit from sickness. The goal of Maha is to reform the largest and most powerful industry in the United States. Now, how about we just get rid of that industry? right? The idea that we want to reform the pharmaceutical industry, like how about we just get rid of the big pharma dynamic? Let companies be companies. Let's stop. We don't need some government incestuous fascist overlap of this, which is the case. Whether it's the NIH or politicians who directly profit from the way these things go forward. So that's my problem with that. We keep acting like we want to alter and reform and shift and update. No, most of what people wanted that were drifted into this by Maha and MAGA was removal, right? Not shifting, but complete removal. Get rid of the Fed, get rid of the IRS, which I argue were wildly unlikely, but I want those things too. Here we are. I have little doubt that these companies and their conflicted media outlets will continue to pay bloggers and other social media influencers to weaponize innuendo. I think what he's actually referencing here is like the mainstream attack on her, as opposed to the MAGA internal concern about what she is. That's usually how they play this. Democrats hate her, so you should blindly trust her. And it works for some of them, but it will not work. Every day I wake up and emboldened to drive change because I know the support of Maha Moms has my back. Casey has played an integral role in galvanizing these moms. Casey articulates better than any American. So my point is, doesn't address in any way the concerns of what people are talking about. The blind support, or rather no pushing back on, but continued support for the direction they're all in, or claims of simply not even having a license. Mary Talley Bowden. Shouldn't the Surgeon General have an active medical license? Now, maybe it's the case that you don't technically need one to be Surgeon General. Technically, you don't need, that's not as abnormal as you may think. People with the highest power don't, like the president doesn't have to be military, right? But yet he's the commander in chief. That happens. But I think it's an interesting choice. Steve Kurt says, RFK Jr. is not calling the shots here. I know this was not his first choice. See, I hate that. But maybe he's not. You should consider that. But we don't know this. We don't know that. Maybe he's been maybe he picks this person for other reasons. I think we need to recognize every single step. It's just not in the direction that we were promised. That's what I think is very clear. The problem, though, is that every single time there's an example of something that shouldn't be happening or goes the wrong direction, what do you get? Some kind of a manufactured excuse. For example, hangover Democrats, right? Brooke Jackson said this in our interview. Even Barnes, who was her lawyer, came up and said around the fact that the DOJ sided with Pfizer without any evidence to back it up, that apparently it was a couple of lefty hangovers in the DOJ. And Brooke doesn't agree with that, and it doesn't seem to make sense to me. But it doesn't. There's no evidence, and we just keep going forward. And now people just go, "Oh well, it was lefties." Well, see, what keeps happening is that when you say that, people weirdly then don't care about the problem anymore. Well, shouldn't we still care that Trump sides with Pfizer, whether or not that's because of X, Y, and Z? Apparently not. And so that's how this continues to work. And I think it's pretty obvious that with everything else that's happening, he does. But they'll always go, well, that was because of those lefty. Or the Epstein discussion we'll get to next about how apparently there's these background people. Well, why aren't they in prison then? If you know it's them, where are they? Why aren't they in prison? What's their name? What's their position? Doesn't happen because they don't exist, in my opinion. In this case, as I just simply said, told you, because I knew this was the thing we all did, that this was going to be coming. Alex Jones says, watch Marjorie Taylor Greene raise the alarm about globalist traitors inside the Republican Party trying to sabotage the Trump agenda. The overarching point is this gives you excuse to say no matter anything bad, it's because of those saboteurs. Okay, so you mean your administration, Republicans no less. So were they secret saboteurs, or are they just suddenly called that when they don't align with your agenda? The point is, guys, you can always pretend it's some internal guess what? They're lying to you. Now, not about whether there's internal people pushing back. These are their agendas. These are not some holdover dynamic. Trump sided with Pfizer because he did the first time. Trump is rolling out Stargate because he did the first time. It's the same discussion. Left and right, they're on the same path. But they give you an excuse. People who just don't want to believe it because their world is built around this guy or Biden or whatever else will take what they can get. So, to point out an important interview that James and I had, James Corbett interview, this is from April 26th, 2025, entitled Engineered Division and Subservience Under a Guise of Resistance, which applies to the left and the right. Right? The left in resistance against the Trump administration, when in reality, you're just basically, it's about creating the feeling that you're resisting the power, when in reality, you are fighting for the power. It's the divide and conquer dynamic. And that's why I changed this meme to make it look like left and right reversed, but with deep state in their mind, because they both think the other side's a deep state. And even though it's all of your government, or, not as simple as that, the point is it's just not, it's not one faction of it. It is simply a government dynamic. And frankly, I think we have been overtaken by whatever we think this dynamic is, technocratic, globalist, Zionist kind of glob, this problem that we keep seeing. The point is, as long as they get you thinking you're pushing back, blinding you to everything else happening. Now, on the first, which we've been seeing escalate continually, the Epstein files are day one, we're going to do this. Day one, we're going to do that. And, and it keeps stretching out, which nobody with a brain ever thought half these things were going to happen on day one. But they told you were dumb for not agreeing with that. And now when it comes out, give them some time. You can't do it right away. Well, you get to play it both ways, don't you? White House has, quote, no specific timeline to release Epstein files despite Trump's promises. What does that even mean? I mean, guys, anybody with a brain at this point is going, okay, this is clearly not what we were told. All the people involved with the phase 1 binders that gave you really nothing new, they were part of the manipulation and have yet to say so. So either they knew it from the beginning or they're too afraid to admit that they were played. The point to show you this is that they were telling you we have no specific timeline. So basically still dripping it forward. We're going to keep, this will come out. That's the point. We will eventually get to the information. Well, the point is, if you understand the reality of this, even remotely, you recognize that it's not partisan. You recognize that it involves Israel. You recognize that Trump and the rest of them are all very tapped into this problem. So here, U.S. Homeland Security News simply says, there is no Epstein list, which we've heard them continue to float. Like this was one of the counterpoints that they started to float out. Well, there's not really a list per se, even though, yes, there is. And Derek Bros recently just talked about this. Actually, that was something I was going to grab. But the idea of that, yeah, well, there is a black book. There is a conversation. We've had this before. But on top of that, well, I don't think anybody's necessarily saying that there's a one-stop shop paper list that in your files, but where are the people that were guilty? You keep telling us you've got the crimes that you can see, people that were victimized. Okay, then who was the person that did this, right? Who did Epstein deal with? Well, he wasn't just selling it to nobody, right? He was facilitating a service for whom? For whom? And I think that's the important way to look at this. They do have information here, guys. Oh, here, hold on. I just want to show you this to give, Derek a shout out as well. Because he's been doing work around this for a long time as well. Let's see. Should be right here. Maybe not. Dang it. Well, I don't want to keep scrolling for it. He recently posted something about that. Anyway, I'll come back to it later. I'll try and include it. The bottom line, to the main point here, there is no Epstein list. Certain clients of Epstein Island are known, but a separate criminal case would have to be filed based on individual incidents and alleged crimes, based on witness testimony and hard evidence. Right, so that is the slow distancing of the reality. Well, we'll get there. It'll just take more abstract direction time and drift in the background until you just stop asking for it. That's how this works. No such evidence is known to exist. A list of clients proves nothing, and publishing such a list would not result in arrest or prosecution. Very sorry. Epstein criminals have covered the tracks very well. This is what you're getting from the administration promising to deal with this. Or did we forget already about the JFK lie they put out that didn't really solve anything, or the other things they keep promising? Like Corey Hughes told you, there was this mostly just misdirection, ultimately. Now, here's what you're getting from the current conversation as of May 6th from Gateway Pundit. Representative James Comer comes out, claims Epstein files may have been destroyed. Now, they've already basically floated this. We already talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago, where they said, well, it might have been destroyed because of the bad guys in the FBI. Very clearly, they wanted to prime you for that because they knew this wasn't coming. That's how I read this. Accuses federal government of possible cover-up. Okay, so so people reading the Gateway Pundit read that as the Democrats, right? Even though this has been ongoing, multiple administrations, it's just so funny how this plays out. But it goes, in a new interview with Betty Johnson, of course, typical, House Oversight Chairman Representative James Comer revealed what may be the most damning development yet in the fight to uncover the truth behind Jeffrey Epstein's sinister global sex trafficking and blackmail network. The Epstein files may have been already destroyed, and the federal government might be complicit. So your bombshell development is, I have no idea, but I think things might have happened. Whoa, that's incredible, Betty Johnson. You're nailing it. I mean, come on, guys. And you realize that Kash Patel just under oath just said that Epstein killed himself, by the way, if we're still playing that little song and dance, you know, in a location, which I literally just said the other day, in a facility literally designed to stop you from being able to kill yourself, in bunk beds that are too short to do so, with a sheet apparently that's made out of fabric soft enough to break if you even try to tear it. But let's pretend he did that and jumped off the bed and killed himself. I mean, and that the cameras all just malfunctioned at the exact same time and the guards went on break exact same time. I mean, are we forgetting how dumb all that was? Like, it's absolutely insane. Here's Kash Patel. He killed himself. Okay, so toe in the line. Don't expect anything different. These people are lackeys. I mean, look at what people have been put in these positions, guys. These are people that are so excited to be in this position that they don't even, they're not people that I think are going to stand up for what's right. Bongino, Kash, the rest of them, these guys are cartoons, in my opinion, and they're clearly showing you this stuff. They're not doing anything of substance. It's all show. Comer, who has so spearheaded numerous high-profile investigations into Biden family corruption, of course. Only one direction this goes, and the weaponization of federal agencies made it clear he believes the Department of Justice no longer has the files, if they ever did. What? So, okay, so all of you have been telling us this is coming. So if Comer at that point already thought they didn't exist, why didn't he speak up then? Why didn't they stand up and go, well, I don't think they're coming at all because I don't think they exist? No, they all said, oh, it's coming. We're going to break this wide open. And then now he goes, well, I don't even think they were ever there to begin with. Oh, that really lines up. That feels real that you just kept back that nugget until it was most impactful. No longer has them if they ever existed. Guys, this is like they think they're in a TV show. This feels like a B movie to me. Comer believes the files are already destroyed to cover up the deep state. Gateway pundit, to cover up the deep state. I think it's either they're this remedial or they know the audience they're aiming at. It says, I don't think the Department of Justice has the Epstein files, or at least the Attorney General does not have them, or she would have turned them over. The president ordered them released. Oh, okay. So then explain to me why Bondi keeps telling us that they're just about to come out. After this, I'll play a clip next where she says, no, it's coming. Now, look, he's saying what he thinks. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what's happening or what she thinks, but he's giving you insight into what he thinks they're thinking. That does not sound like an intelligent thing to say to me. The Attorney General ordered them released. He says, we all know that they have not been released. Well, then why did they tell you in the beginning that they were? Why did Bondi put out phase one and go, and test the waters until we started going, wait a minute, this is nothing. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, I've got truckloads. That's why we got more coming. Hold on. Then why did they try to make it seem as if that was what happened if they already knew? It's just so lazy. One of the biggest fears, which I expressed with Kash Patel, he says, and a lot of people, including Stephen Miller, the Zionist who has every interest in hiding the Mossad connection here, going into the new administration was this. I hope they're not shredding documents right now. This was a few weeks ago before transition. The task force on the declassification of federal secrets, led by Representative Anna Polina, another very intelligent person, Polina Luna, has been relentless in the pursuit of transparency, but Comer revealed that Luna's pretty frustrated by the stonewalling. Another person who keeps pretending like everything's on track. It's all coming your way. And now wants you to think that they're frustrated because of stonewalling that we're not being told about, or, it is a story. But Benny Johnson breaks it all down for you. Okay, here, the next day. Benny Johnson. A.J. Bondi announces the FBI is diligently going through the Epstein files. There are tens of thousands. I'll play it for you. This is what she says. It's really low. I won't cut in. Basically says what, they were talking yesterday and said the Epstein files might not be there. Here's his response.
James Comer said yesterday that all the Epstein files are missing. Can you confirm the status of them? We still haven't heard from you.
No, the FBI, the FBI, they're reviewing, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn. And there are hundreds of victims. And no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently going through that. I haven't seen that statement, but I'll call him later and find out.
Okay, so flatly denies that. So just my point is, I don't believe any of them. My point is, I don't take anything at face value, rather. The point is that if he's saying, well, they're probably already gone, and she's like, no. Okay. So if and when we don't ever get more information about this, and remember that she was very clear, no, we've got it. Okay. Troves of child pornography and all the things they're talking about, which doesn't surprise me. We know what was going on in this overlap. But are we going to forget that Acosta and Trump's last administration made it clear there was a CIA Mossad connection here? And that Trump has very clear connection with him, along with pretty much everybody that we could talk about in this core conversation, left and right? Does that matter? Okay, what we're going to talk about is actual accountability. Look, I get the victim overlap is that's a valid claim. But, let me just cut to this. Because I'm just going to repeat what this said. There we go. Here's what Matt Walsh had to say about this exact statement. The idea that the FBI is still going through documents 6 years after the guy was arrested is just not credible. That's a very easy to understand point. The only thing we want to know is which powerful or prominent people Epstein was involved with. We want the names. 6 years later, they must know the names. It doesn't take a major intellect to understand how they're aiming this at the easy to manipulate people. That's their bread and butter. The people that will not along with whatever they think they're supposed to not along with. That's what this is aimed at. Cat turd, perfect example. You mean there's tons? And by the way, what's funny is I'm making fun of him because I think this guy's got the intellect of a house mouse. But the point is, ultimately, he's still pushing back. You mean there's tens of thousands of videos of half of Hollywood? Or I take it back. This is the different one. He says, you mean there's tens of thousands of videos of half of Hollywood, half of globalists, which means Democrats, and half of DC with children? We know. Oh, you do you? You know something that you've never seen, that nobody's ever proven to you? I'm not going to dismiss the obvious overlap. People like Dennis Hastert, for example, I always do that. It's the second in line of the president as the third person president. Then there's one in line, there's a second behind him. That is the speaker who was behind Bush. The guy was accused, he got called a serial pedophile, a serial child molester by the judge who sentenced him to prison. My point is, it's not unique to left and right. There's plenty of examples of this. My point is, you should not dismiss the possibility that there's people like that who are in positions of power, left or right. But the fact that he says, we know that you've got thousands of videos, why would you know that? Because that's your opinion, and you know your opinion when it works for you. These people are children, and they're out there manipulating very, very, very large groups of people. My point overall is that they will never push back on these people until it works for their interest, because they're team sport politics manipulators. My response was to this person saying we're going to diligently go through the files was, oh, okay. Oh, sure. Gotcha. Partisan cheerleaders. Remember this? February 27th, DC Drano. Today I met with President Trump, J.D. Vance, and Bondi, and the FBI director, all involved. They handed me a binder and copy of the Epstein files, which were nothing of the kind, which everybody laughed about. Most of it was blacked out. But these guys sure as hell sold you like it was the end-all, be-all, going to change the world. This is the most transparent administration in history, he writes. Guys, just recognize who these people are. That's libs of TikTok, right? That's DC Drano. They're all there. It's phase one. And as I said, oh, how cute. They even printed little titles for you. Epstein files, phase one. Seriously? That's embarrassing. You're either being played or part of the play. Here's Kash Patel said, though, right? So all that's going on. You know they've got evidence. Or even let's just say put aside the Epstein files if you want to focus on what they've said before that. All the different claims of people stealing money from USAID, Social Security, any number of things. Where are all the people going to prison? Where isn't Fauci in prison? I'll show you why. Because these are the only two things they seem focused on right now. Don't forget that Pam Bondi came out and the first two things she did was an investigation for October 7th, which makes no sense for America First, or an investigation around anti-Semitism. Also has no bearing on America First conversation from MAGA, which is what they were promised is the point. Every single one of them, all Zionists, this is what they're focused on. Here's what Kash Patel says. Breaking out of New York FBI. I can confirm that this morning our agents and partners arrested. I wonder who "and partners" means. Interesting. Maybe it means police. Maybe not. Maybe it's Batar USA. arrested an individual on charges related to 3 separate violent assaults of Jewish Americans. The subject had allegedly targeted Jewish citizens during multiple protests of the Israel-Gaza war on 3 separate occasions over 9 months. Woo, very intensive investigation for something that could be easily handled by local police. Based on the allegations, the subject will be charged with hate crimes. Oh, well, guys, look at that. I thought we all agreed hate crimes were nothing and that there was a lie, that crimes are crimes. Hate crimes are a manufactured lie. A hate crime is something you add to make it seem as if, so if you violently attack somebody, that's a crime. But if they claim you did it because you hate their religion, whoa, that's a much more serious crime. Why? The crime is the crime. Everything else is a lens you put over it. And many times you could be lying about that. Now, I'm not going to, I actually would agree that racially motivated crimes are pretty disgusting. Doesn't change the fact that under the law, we should be equal under that overlaps with the idea of beliefs and free speech and everything else. The crime is where the line is, and they broke the law. I'll charge them with the crime. Now he's telling you hate speech. That means woke, guys. That is cancel culture, ideological manipulation. The recent spike in violent crime against Jewish citizens is deeply disturbing, except it doesn't exist. Remember, we already proven this. There's been multiple, in fact, I think peer-reviewed science on this, or rather, I should say study, that Greenblatt got caught. The ADL got caught. They got caught and were exposed for making and they even admitted this, anything Palestinian, a protest for Palestine, was deemed anti-Semitic, which then they claimed was a Jewish, a crime against Jewish society or citizens. But it says, and this FBI will continue to pursue those responsible, we will have more to say soon. So overall, I'm willing to bet you anything when this develops that it was not a violent assault. It was a claim that they were saying these things. But even if it was a violent assault, then charge them for violence. That is not an FBI investigation unless it's for Israel. And then we understand why this is happening. On top of that, what somebody said, which I think is a very, very valid point, and this is Elijah Schaefer, just E, I believe he's a conservative, right? Yeah, Gateway Pundit. Here's what he says. So these are American citizens or Jewish citizens? Never heard anyone describe someone as a Christian citizen. This is all too bizarre. You know you're a fraud, Cash, and you're blackmailed. Funny how they always give them that out. You and Pam are absolutely a tragic disappointment. That's a very valid point. Why are you discussing this as Jewish citizens down here? Wouldn't that be American citizens? Now, I'm not saying that is about, the whole point is to get people to jump at the idea that Jewish people are the influence as opposed to Zionism. Even though, yes, there's an obvious overlap, but there's also an obvious overlap with Christian Zionism or even Zionist atheists that exist in Israel and are quite prominent. In fact, I know that always spins people out, but look it up. It exposes the whole ploy. The bottom line, guys, is ask yourself why this is what they're focusing time on. With everything else that you guys were promised, how do you not see what's happening by now? This is a co-opted country. This is obvious, and people all over the world are calling it out. And even people like Judge Napolitano, people like Jeffrey Sachs, people are coming out left and right to tell you it's not about some racist overlap. It's about a government who has completely influenced this government. Daniel McAdams, to make that point even more clear, highlights what Marco Rubio said. He says, we are reviewing the visa status, which I'll talk about more tomorrow, of the trespassers and vandals who took over Columbia University's library. So they are still focusing back on that conversation. Pro-Hamas thugs are no longer welcome in our nation. Okay, so all you're saying is you're not allowed to protest if it's against Israel. Because you realize there are people all over. The right has done this in response to plenty of different things. There's protests all over the place. Now, if you argue that what they did was illegal, then you could charge them with trespassing, because that's the best you could do. There was no violence in this conversation. And there were Jewish and Muslim and Christian people that were celebrating together and protesting at the same time. Celebrating is the point. They were there over Passover. And so they celebrated a Jewish holiday with all the anti-Semites, apparently. The point overall, as Daniel says, people who protest Israel's genocide of Palestinian civilians are not pro-Hamas thugs. That is a language of Hitler. But you realize they know what they're doing. If they just always make it pro-Hamas thugs, it gives an easy talking point to people that don't care about the truth, but it also makes them sound like they're violent, even though there was no violence to speak of. Same point here when Speaker Johnson does exactly the same thing and captions what he says and also let's realize they're saying reviewing the visa status. So that's all they're doing. They're going to say, we're going to not review. We're going to yank your visa because Israel showed us you were at a protest against Israel. That's not even being made up. That's what Batar US and these other Zionist groups have been proudly promoting. Khalil was the first one. They gave them that list. It's all on the record. So he's saying we're going to illegally, with no process, remove their visas and kick them out of the country. They have, as every other conversation we've had, the right to somebody. So what crime are you being accused of? There's no criminal record here. They're not breaking the law. See, the idea they can just revoke that is not the reality of the law, despite all the screaming lies of people that are too immature to admit it. But Speaker Johnson says, attention, pro-Hamas rioters. It just shows you how cartoonish this all is. That these people are grown men who have to knowingly continue to use the same kind of hyperbolic language that Israel was during the entirety of their ongoing genocide, right? Pro-Hamas rioters, rape terror dungeons, even though none of that actually happened, and you could prove that today. They did it for a reason, so that became the narrative. The same thing these complete children are doing. Attention, pro-Hamas rioters. Even though they were Palestinian protesters that did not riot, on college campuses across the country, you're on notice. So he's doing Israel's bidding, yet again. America will no longer tolerate your anti-Semitic violence. Is it violent because they have the ideas you claim are anti-Semitic? Well, they sure as hell didn't do anything violent. Destruction, harassment, intimidation. That is the narrative that we have disproven 400 times over. Here we are. That's the point, guys. Now, that'll overlap with the conversation of surveillance, which if I was going to make it longer today, we would get into the overlap of the visa conversation. We'll do that tomorrow. But let's fold this in. So they're using this conversation of going after people for Israel, even though they are doing that. But they're using that for their side of it to continue to build out the biometric surveillance. I mean, I don't even know what the right word for what we're about. I think there is not a word that truly encapsulates what this is becoming. Now, what I framed it after was the term that was used in this, the supercharged surveillance, biometric database. But you tell me, this is becoming something that is not even about the United States anymore. This is about a global surveillance dynamic, and that has to really, I think it needs to really impress upon us the gravity of the situation. So we already showed you some of these, right? And this is just a few of them. I could talk for 20 minutes about the different examples we've seen just since the current administration, but even going back into Biden's and even before that, where they have been building this. Because in fact, one of the other ones I was showing was, what was that about? I was an Intercept article from 2017. Let me see if I can grab it actually. What was it? So basically the Intercept 2017, that didn't pop up, but I've covered it before. The bottom line is Trump's last administration allowed Palantir to take over police databases back then. Okay. So add that to the list we're going to show you. So here's 2025, April, Palantir helping Doge with IRS. So understand what these show you, and we've gone through these in depth. They had siloed aspects of information for privacy and concern. They just ripped that apart. They've dumped it into one central idea. They're using a central database, and basically the siloed information has been removed, right? In regard to these different locations. Now they are centralized. They've admitted that. On top of that, they're using that information to train their large language models and their AI. They've also been it was called out in Congress. I shouldn't say they've been very clear about it, but they have admitted it. Even the GSAI bot is a bot they're using to facilitate it, but they're scooping up information every second. Privacy concerns, foreign policy concerns with whatever governments are influencing or accessing this information, where there's no ethics pledges from the very beginning, so there's no reason to think they even care about the law. And they've shown you the law doesn't matter. Palantir's helping with a massive IRS data project. So scooping up all that information from the IRS. We have the example from RFK and his medical side of it. Right? That we're going to scoop up all the Oracle medical data, but we're also going to use the autism database. We're going to scoop up everything we can. And they accentuated the point. Medication records from pharmacy chains, lab testing, genomics data from patients treated by the Department of Veterans Affairs, claims from private insurers, data from your smartwatches, your fitness trackers, all linked together. So when you bought that Apple Watch, did you realize they were going to scoop it all into one central database and watch what you're doing? Yeah, because they always do. That's happening from Maha. Okay, then we have Palantir OS. right? From the immigration side of it, fuels Trump administration's immigrant removal agenda. That is happening, but you have to realize it's multifaceted. So I think the immigration part of it is a means to an end, but that's part of what Israel's manufacturing as well. So understand this is all continuing. That's April 2021. Now here is where we bring it into the overlap. And again, like I said, there's many more examples we could fold into that. What Doge has been doing from the beginning, I think, is a complete shell game. It was about one thing, and they were making you thinking about something else. They're building this out in front of you. Biometric.update.com says Doge's infiltration into core of federal biometrics management sets off alarms. May 7th. The Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, has now insinuated itself into the Department of Homeland Security's DHS Office of Biometric Identity Management, the OBIM, one of the federal government's most sensitive agencies. And the point, or rather the thing to consider, is how does this make sense with the stated vision, the mission of Doge? Right? Well, I'm sure they could contort it into, well, we need biometrics to better facilitate or make efficient our immigration, whatever. But it doesn't actually meet what they claim they're doing. To me, this is not about Doge trying to make more efficient the OBIM. It's about them and Doge, whatever it really is doing, consolidating information for whatever technocratic control structure that Catherine has been telling you they've been building for a long time. Now they're showing you. They're literally now folding themselves into the biometric identity management aspect of the federal government. Now it says, and what do you think they're scooping up using the immigration discussion? Your iris scans, your facial scans, and they're building a wall to do all of it. It says, once a relatively obscure but essential component of the DHS, which serves the Department of Justice, Pentagon, intelligence community, all of which now Doge has access to, which then I argue means Israel does as well, if they didn't already. The OBIM is now under new scrutiny as Doge, which has a broad and shadowy mission to ostensibly streamline federal operations and assert greater executive oversight over digital infrastructure. One of the main things of the way we pretend our government operates is that you do not get greater oversight or greater consolidation from any one branch. We have watched this happen rapidly, and tomorrow I'll go more over the screaming lies of people like Stephen Miller about a judicial coup. When what you can see, if you want to find a judicial coup, is what happened in Honduras, what happened in El Salvador at the behest of the U.S. government or with their involvement, or plenty of other places, Israel, for example. But what we're talking about here, whether politically motivated or not, are judges who are pushing back on things that are flatly unconstitutional, and they call it a coup because they want to accomplish it. It's insane to me how clear it is. And people are breaking the law everywhere. It doesn't mean these judges don't also lie. The clear point, though, is you can prove, as I've done every day we've talked about it, that you're being lied to. And it's for very obvious reasons. So it goes on to say, Doge's infiltration of the OBIM is raising serious and legitimate questions about what it intends to do with the United States' principal biometric surveillance architecture. Well, we damn well know. Guys, it couldn't be more obvious. I'll get more into it if you don't know by now as we go past this. The OBIM manages one of the largest biometric identity systems in the world. It's not just about the U.S. Supporting border enforcement, visa applications, immigration adjudications, law enforcement, and intelligence functions by maintaining a massive biometric repository of fingerprints, facial recognition scans, and iris data. Its legacy system, the Automated Biometric Identification System, or IDENT, stores more than 300 million biometric records and routinely handles hundreds of thousands of queries daily. Despite its age, IDENT remains a cornerstone at the moment of the U.S. Homeland Security infrastructure, relied upon not only by the DHS, but also by other federal departments and even international partners. That's very interesting. So as this builds, it becomes an international databank. In recent weeks, 3 individuals, one currently with the DHS and 2 more familiar with the matter, have now confirmed to the platform that Doge has now embedded itself in the OBIM, the biometric database. Now, FedScoop, this is according to FedScoop reporting this, 2 of these sources reported that Doge is pushing to revive internal conversations around the long-delayed and politically sensitive Homeland Advanced Recognition Technology, known as HART. Something that was rolled out, sort of like total information awareness, that got kind of pushed back and it stalled 2018, 2022. And now whether we like it or not, is what I see coming. I don't even think they're going to ask. And frankly, I don't think it matters at this point. I think it's already happened. This is just them instituting what we know. Meant to replace ident. That's originally how it goes, right? So they introduced the Homeland Advanced Recognition and Technology to replace ident, to bring it into the cloud-based new service that they all want to break out. Rather, that's the whole narrative of what they're trying to do. Make it more efficient and bring it into the technological advancement. HART was envisioned as more modern, cloud-hosted biometric system capable of sophisticated identity matching without the burdens of aging hardware dependencies. However, HART has struggled for years with implementation challenges, cost overruns, and internal controversy, leaving its future uncertain. All of those are true. The controversy is obvious for reasons there's concerns about obvious privacy, which we'll get into, but really just the idea that these were, maybe too early to try to implement it. We're now at the technological point where they can, or maybe they're ready for it. Doge's presence at OBIM is not merely observational. One DHS source reportedly stated that Doge recently requested a detailed memo examining the future of HART, ident, and the travel verification service. Why? TVS is a separate biometric system operated by U.S. Customs and Border Control for use at ports of entry and airports. Okay, so if Doge's direction is about making things more efficient, why are they investigating these? You know what? It's very clear. Doge is simply another arm of Trump's administration. That's all this is. And they are effectively carrying out agendas when that has been the whole point, was that they are simply supposed to be advising, when in reality, you see them stepping in and demanding information about this is not and what they're doing is collecting information around the biometric immigration discussion. None of that, in my opinion, has anything to do with them with making this work more efficiently in the context of saving money. Let's put it this way. One of the main issues with HART was the financial issue. Now this is becoming the focal point. So it's not about saving anything. It's about initiating the control structure through the justification of changing for better. That's how I read it anyway. Please look into it for yourself. What I think is very fascinating is what Doge is doing right here. Detailed memos explaining the different overlaps and how it will be used and where it goes forward does not seem like what their mandate is. It is when you realize that their job is simply to roll out the technocratic control structure using artificial intelligence under a guise of making it more efficient, as a nod right back to the efficiency movement of Technocracy Inc. and Elon's grandfather, who, by the way, weirdly enough, in an interview, his father anyway, just said that he gave Starlink to Hamas, which I think is such a weird thing to say. The HART initiative has been a particular flashpoint with DHS, initially proposed as a next-generation solution to ident's aging infrastructure. See, that's how all these things go. They see something on the decline, they rationalize basically get you to call for what they want to happen. It says HART was designed to shift biometric identity management to the cloud and utilize modular software-driven architecture. However, its promise has been mired in missteps. A 2022 attempt to deploy HART in parallel operations with ident meant to allow side-by-side performance evaluations collapse due to technical shortcomings. In 2023, the Government Accountability Office had flagged serious issues related to privacy compliance, program oversight, budget transparency. The program's cost ballooned far beyond original projections, and key components remained years behind schedule. Sure sounds like the efficient direction we should be taking, right? Instead of relying on a single contractor, the program was diversified across multiple vendors, and internal federal technical personnel were given a larger role. Now, I highlighted that because I'm willing to bet you anything. Once this gets pointed to, it'll become very clear that it is Palantir, whatever, Doge, XAI, whatever makes sense for where they use this. It will become their people, as opposed to the diversification of multiple, which if you do that, it makes it harder to control. But let's remember, ballooning costs, privacy issues, program oversight, all the things that they claim, so far, sort of don't matter. In the conversation of Doge, they made clear that, we'll consider privacy, but, as an afterthought. Right in the beginning, taking away the silent information and bringing them all together, the first concern was that this is going to risk privacy. And they said, we'll deal with it when we get there. It was a leaked discussion, so I don't think they realized they were being seen to be so blithe about it, but they don't care. Doge has also initiated efforts to build a master database, and here we are, capable of integrating information from the SSA, the IRS, state voter rolls, and various DHS systems. So again, every step is more and more and more consolidating it all into one central place, which is the exact opposite of what people demand for privacy. But it sure as hell makes it easier for somebody else to tap in whenever they want. The idea that a politically aligned office like DOJ could help steer the direction of biometric surveillance introduces both ethical and strategic questions. The ident system, for all of its limitations, was developed and maintained under long-standing federal norms around privacy, data use, interagency controls. It's not at all clear whether DOJ abides by federal privacy laws. I think it's pretty obvious they don't, as its internal workings are not transparent, which is obviously the opposite of what they're projecting. The point overall, whether they actually cared about the privacy norms before, at least they were stated in there and at least tried to feign to care about them. At this point, they're just rushing forward with everything they're doing and acting like none of these things even bind their choices because, well, we have a mandate. As if the dumbest people out there are the ones saying that. They don't even realize that's not a carte blanche, guys. They don't just do whatever they want. I mean, you would say the same about Biden, wouldn't you? It's just funny how they can't think past these things. The consolidation of federal biometric capabilities under a single executive-aligned architecture would represent a major inflection point in the history of the American identity infrastructure and citizen surveillance. That's not a good thing. It's so transparently clear. This is about the consolidation in the exact ways that we've always pushed back on. So that was from May 7th. Here, this is from the surveillanceresistancelab.org. Heart attack, H-A-R-T. How DHS's massive biometric database will supercharge surveillance and threaten rights. So the U.S., and that's this weird document, which you can check out right here. Read through it, 60 pages, goes through all the breakdown. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is building a $6.158 billion next wave biometric database that will vastly expand its surveillance capabilities and supercharge the deportation system. So you can see where this all goes. The Homeland Advanced Recognition Technology System. Today under the guise of that, yesterday under something else, COVID-19, it's always whatever the new thing is, it's rationalizing whatever agenda they've already wanted. Will collect, organize, and share invasive data on over 270 million people, including juveniles, that the number projected to grow significantly. Remember, they made clear this is overlapping with the world stuff as well. This data will come from federal agencies, including DHS, the FBI, as well as local and state police, foreign governments. At what point did we just stop caring about how rapidly this used to be a huge deal? There's no legal reality why we didn't vote for this, for your facial scans. It's rationalized under national security, just like everything else. Powered by military-grade technologies. HART will aggregate and compare biometric data, including facial recognition, DNA. Is that their right to take from you? Iris scans, fingerprints, voice prints, more often gathered without obtaining consent or warrant. This will allow DHS to target immigrants for surveillance, or really anybody else, guys. Raids, arrest, detention, deportation. HART could be used to identify people in public spaces. You realize that's what Palantir and Israel are doing right now in Gaza and have been for a long time. Creating chilling consequences for people's rights to protest, which we're currently seeing, in fact, to assemble, to associate, to live their daily lives. HART threatens to violate human and privacy rights at an exponential rate, particularly in Black, brown, and immigrant communities already facing discriminatory policing and surveillance. Despite the terrifying risks, HART remains a black box, shrouded in secrecy with virtually no oversight and accountability mechanisms. Exactly the opposite of what they project. Although only in phase 1 of its development, HART has become now this is not brand new, right? We're in the new phase of this right now. HART has become vastly more expensive than anticipated, generating massive revenues for First, Northrop Grumman, of course. Now that's going to be probably Palantir, the current iteration, I argue. And it says, and now Veritas Capital, a billionaire private equity firm, while troubling questions over its privacy and human rights violations remain. Congress continues to fund HART even though it has failed to meet every milestone in its government contract. Our report explains the dangers of HART by driving into the system's mechanisms, costs, and biometric and biographic data sources. We spotlight the companies profiting from HART's development and the agencies, private companies, and foreign governments that will contribute to and access its data. We outline the short and long-term civil, privacy, and human right risks. The underlying role and impact of HART will be to turbocharge DHS's unchecked power to approve or deny immigration benefits, assemble target lists for ICE raids, expand the tech border wall, and to facilitate surveillance, arrest, immigration detentions, deportation, or, whatever they apply to the current thing they're focusing on. Maybe you saying mean things about Israel. For such reasons, we call DHS to dismantle HART. We also call on Congress to freeze the funds dedicated to it. HART presents unacceptable risks and dangers, will powerfully expand the surveillance capabilities. HART so-called redress measures are effectively non-existent, leaving people with almost no way to challenge content in the massive databases, access their information, or correct errors in their data. Welcome to the artificial intelligence age, where whatever they decide is the truth, regardless of what you could prove. This is where it all goes. Now, as Hackable Animal points out, Palantir Technology and XAI have now partnered along with TWG Global to leverage AI in the financial services industry. Great. So now there's one more angle to it, guys. IRS, immigration, health, right? It's literally the most rapid consolidation of control that I've ever seen. Just like with COVID and financial, it's happening to you right now. He says, hot off the presses, now Thiel and Musk have united once again on financial services, from PayPal to the new XI Palantir TWG partnership. Who will be running CBDCs? Gee, I wonder. Now, could be somebody else, but it's a good point to point. That's probably where it will come from. But as always, we look into it for ourselves. Musk's XAI joins TWG Global Palantir for AI push in financial sector, May 6th. So the obvious point, Total Information Awareness was a government program. They got pushed back, so they, quote, stopped it until they roll it into a private entity, and that became Palantir. That's what it is. Even the first, what InQtel was the first funding contract, which was CIA. I mean, it's the obvious here, guys. Same point for XAI. Don't forget. As far as I can tell, I'm one of the very few that's been covering this this is December 24th, 2024. The quiet transition from DARPA's XAI to Elon's XAI. You can quite literally prove that DARPA ended its XAI, which meant explainable AI program, right before Elon took over Twitter, turned it into X, and started XAI as a totally new thing. We're watching the new thing happen again. And now on top of that, we're watching those two things jam together. Before even that, though, let's not forget that X and XAI have merged into one thing. So now Twitter is part of Palantir, or at least joining as one direction. The Palantir and X and XAI are all linear right now. They're all joined in the same direction, and they're using your data from X, Twitter, to train these models, which they've already been open about. And then this may matter to you. But if you can't see how much these groups are suddenly just consolidating control over your life, I don't know what else to show you. It's right in front of you. These people are not acting in your interest, especially since they're currently working alongside Israel to commit a genocide. And Alice Karp seems to be gleeful about how they kill people. Just in case you haven't seen it. Oh, there was one that I forgot to include, actually. Here, this is the Thiel's Palantir strategic partnership. There's Karp, there's Thiel. Partnering with Israel in January 2024. Imagine that. In the midst of the genocide. Here's the one that I actually forgot to grab. This was Palantir's leaked plan to help ICE deport people. That was the Immigration OS, but this has more information coming from 404 Media. So it says the collaboration will integrate XAI's models. So the data they've been scooping from your freely giving up whatever you say on the platform, which includes its Grok family of large language models, exactly what I'm talking about, and its Colossus supercomputer into business operations. The companies expect many more partners after the inclusion of XAI. Okay, so just understand, the collaboration will integrate XAI, which is now one and the same of Twitter, with Palantir TWG, excuse me. In March, NVIDIA and XAI joined a consortium backed by Microsoft and BlackRock. It's just insane. Are we really going to pretend right now that it's not a big deal, or it wouldn't be if this was a Democrat-run company? that he is joining with Microsoft, BlackRock, and Palantir, and using all of your information in the process. I guess Microsoft and Gates and BlackRock are all okay as long as there's not a D next to his name. Just lazy hypocrisy. It's obvious those things. Logically, it should matter. Matters to me. Doesn't matter whether it's left and right. That's the point. It matters because it matters. And, of course, Musk's most alarming power grab. Now, you won't be surprised to find out that Derek wrote about this all the way back in December 2024. You can't hide. Elon Musk's and SpaceX are helping the U.S. intelligence build the world's largest spy satellite network. Now, this was before Trump took over, had been going on, so he was a contractor for Biden's administration. And then just did the same for Trump because, totally, it's okay for him to work for the pedophile deep state as long as he's making good money, right? I'm being facetious, obviously. That's the absurdity of making these all-in-one narratives about how these people, he's fighting the deep state. Okay, then how does that make sense? Explain that for me. The point is that this is now being pointed out by The Atlantic. There's some additional points to it, but it says, when Elon Musk's engineers bundled a batch of prototype satellites into a rocket's nose cone 6 years ago, there were fewer than 2,000 functional satellites in Earth's orbit. Many more would soon be on the way. All through the pandemic and the years that followed, Musk's company, SpaceX, kept launching them while everybody else stopped. Feels like he was given special permission. More than 7,000 of his satellites now surround Earth like a cloud of gnats. This fleet, which works to provide space-based internet service to the ground, dwarfs those of all other private companies and other countries put together. Like, really, and it'll make this more clear, but just right there, take a second and think about that kind of influence and control. You're not only the richest man in the planet, if that's to be believed. You have more satellites by a factor of 20 in space, and you currently have more in general than all private companies and other countries combined. And it's while they are rapidly going in the direction of using this for everything. You don't think that gives him control over just data, information, communication to a point that is almost terrifying with what we've seen him do? Even just from a petty, childish perspective. It says, and almost every week Musk adds to it, flinging dozens more satellites into the sky. It says, in the not-so-distant future, an expanded version of this system, or one very much like it, could overtake broadband, so it's talking about Starlink and his satellite network, could overtake broadband as the internet's backbone. So not only just cornering the market on just information and phones and any kind of data sharing, but ultimately, potentially just the internet itself. I mean, you think having control over Twitter gives him, think about what that could mean. And look, let's be clear. This is not Republican Elon. I don't care who we're talking about. One person who is politically active or motivated or in the government should not have this kind of control. But you have to understand, this has been building from Biden's into Trump's. It's not a left-right dynamic. It's about getting you trapped in the left-right paradigm so this happens without you paying attention. It says the majority of our communications, it says a decade or two from now, it could be among our most crucial information infrastructure, Elon Musk's Starlink. The majority of our communications, our entertainment, our global commerce might be beamed back and forth between satellites and the Earth through Starlink, is the point. If Musk continues to dominate the launchers that take satellites to space, and the satellites themselves, by the way, and the internet services that operate up there, he could end up with more power over the human exchange of information than any person who has ever lived. Absorb that for a second. This is not even remotely hyperbolic or alarmist. I mean, we've talked about the satellite point, but I don't even know why I didn't necessarily connect this when I talked about it last time. I mean, I guess I thought because maybe the globe wouldn't necessarily just allow, but it seems as if that's happening. So that needs to show you like another lockstep kind of overlap here. President Donald Trump has just delayed, and this is important as well, a $42 billion federal effort to expand broadband services. You know why? Especially in rural areas, he says. His administration has decided to make that project tech neutral. such as that cable hookups aren't necessarily preferred over satellite, which means Starlink can compete for the money, which I think if you're not stupid, you understand that means it's probably going to go to Starlink. Not my opinion, but you see how these things work. Like you give the appearance of some kind of fair situation, and then they just dump it all in the obvious because they're going to claim it's better and it's what people want and blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's the truth. The point, though, you already had a thing going forward with this, which most of Americans use, and you pulled back on it to allow the other option. That may not be nefarious, but I think you have to see where this stuff goes. In Gaza, medics have used Starlink while healing the wounded. At times when the people of Myanmar and Sudan learned that their internet had been shut off by their autocratic governments, they turn to Starlink. Ukraine soldiers use it to communicate in front lines. Okay, yeah, that sure sounds nice if you paint it that way. Now, here's another way you could look at it. Israel has been using Starlink along with Palantir over Gaza for all sorts of other nefarious purposes. In Myanmar and Sudan, the governments that have created the despotic situation are backed by Israel and the United States, and they've allowed that to be the justification for why Starlink was deployed in yet another military zone. In Ukraine, the exact same point. And it's even come to the point to where he pretends he doesn't want Ukraine using it, but never really stopped them from using it. What about Honduras, where they deployed Starlink after they basically, through an illegal coup, took control of the government and deployed Prospera through Thiel's backed company, who is currently growing and taking over parts of Honduras? What about in El Salvador or any number of places where they've used every single time? Do you notice a pattern? War. With every single time we've seen this, when they're in a war zone, you see this delivered. Now, yeah, maybe it's giving some people internet, but I see it sort of as the Neuralink giving this guy the use of his arms, but it's also enslaving humanity, right? That is where I see that going. This is not about helping people. That's my opinion. I think what you can clearly see is this is the central link between this growing technocratic control structure, the biometric surveillance network, and the Starlink is the central linchpin. And it's being justified and rolled out all over the place, but realize it's not about helping. If it's being used in places for basically control and surveillance, it's not about you or about helping you. Musk's ability to deliver this crucial service, and look, to be clear again, I hope I'm wrong. I will jump up and down praising everything if it turns out that what we see coming is not happening. This is not some willful decision to see the worst. And this is what I believe is happening based on all the facts, not partisan left or right, but just the full breadth of it. And I could be wrong. I hope I am. Musk's ability to deliver this crucial service, the ability to coordinate action in conflict zones. That's the thing right there is exactly the point. The ability to coordinate action in conflict zones or everything else has given him unprecedented geopolitical leverage for a private citizen. Yes, even now. Reportedly, Pentagon officials have already had to go hat in hand to Elon Musk after he threatened to restrict Starlink service to Ukrainian troops who were using it to launch attacks to Russia. Now, yes, they give you the whole back and forth where he was conflicted about the war. What actually happened? Narrative aside, Ukraine was using it for military purposes. The Pentagon needed that, so he let them use it. That's what happened. All the rest is narrative. He is not merely a mogul. Kimberly Siverson Burke, a director at Quality, what does it say? Is it Qtly Space? I can't read that. I have it on a screenshot. If you don't notice for the podcast, because we always lose the highlighting for some reason on the articles, which I started taking screenshots for. But it goes on to say, an aerospace research firm. This is someone who can flip a switch and decide the outcome of a war. That's right now, you understand. So just wait until this becomes the ubiquitous internet communication medium. And then ask yourself how that, on top of having most money over anybody on the planet and most influence over anybody on the planet, can somehow, he might as well become the king of the world. It's without even batting an eye. I'm not trying to be facetious, guys. This is a lot. Again, the article is entitled Elon Musk's Most Alarming Power Grab. Again, don't forget that Derek wrote about this 2024. The newest ones weigh more than, and this is about the satellites, weigh more than half a ton. And once their solar panel wings unfurl, they measure about 100 feet across. The company can reportedly manufacture at least 4 of these a day. And SpaceX's reusable Falcon 9 rocket can hold more than 25 of them at once, all folded up inside its nose cone. So at the very least, you could arguably say that they're sending 4 of these a day. I don't think it's happening, but I'm saying, like, realizing that comparatively to other people, Musk is able to launch these bundles of satellites at a Gatling gun pace, while his competitors operate at musket speed with rockets that must be rebuilt from scratch each time. Last year, SpaceX successfully lofted 133 rockets into orbit, and more than 60% of them were carrying Starlink satellites. Now, there's a whole thing to talk about there, whether there's plenty more payloads going up with these things than we realize. Every one of Musk's commercial competitors and also every nation's military combined launched fewer rockets than he did. One man. Technically he's a civilian, even though that's not true in every context, as he's a military contractor, he's part of the government. I mean, this is a game to keep him somehow seeming like he's this bumbling doofus that has no idea. I mean, I'm not saying I necessarily have him in the highest regard, and at the end of the day, either he's being used in this role or he is doing it. The clear reality is that Elon Musk and what he's rolling out is something we should be concerned about. Now, I mean, even if he has the best of intentions, this is a consolidation of power, just like with the data part of it, that should never be allowed for anybody. We used to all agree on that. It says Starlink's largest commercial competitor it's OneWeb. OneWeb has more than 600 satellites compared to Musk's more than 7,000. And of course, if he's making 5 a day and going up every week, they're going to continue to rapidly grow beyond that to the point to where nobody can even compete. Separately, European Union nations have spent years planning the construction of a dedicated network of satellites for military and civilian use. But this project was recently dealt a blow when Giorgia Meloni, Italy's prime minister and friend of Musk, announced that she now prefers the deal with Starlink. You see how these things work? So look, that very well in itself could be sort of a little mini coup right there in the context. I'm not even saying whether the election or who was. The point is, he influenced the person who, by means of manipulation or just by organic nature, made her way into power, and then just goes, okay, now we're going in this direction. Or maybe it all just happened because they think it's better. I can't stop seeing how, regardless of the guiding force, it is consolidating in a rapid way. The U.S. government, too, would have good reasons to avoid full dependence on Musk's company for access to the space-based internet. The American military has an orbital network of military-grade satellites that allows for secure government communications and reconnaissance. But this, too, is a Musk product. SpaceX builds the satellites and ferries them to orbit. Military, civilian, communication, data collection. This is insane. The Pentagon's leaders know this is a problem, obviously, or at least they did. During the end of the Biden administration, the U.S. Space Force published a new strategy that ordered the policymakers to avoid over-reliance on any single company. Now, regardless of who, that's an obvious basic logic point. But that was before the Defense Department came under the control of Donald Trump, whose victorious campaign received more than $250 million in support from Musk. When I wrote to the Pentagon to ask whether avoiding over-reliance on one provider was still a priority, he didn't even hear back. But all of the aspiring competitors to Starlink, of all of them, the most formidable is Amazon. So, as always, if there was even going to be a competitor, it would end up being Amazon anyway, guys. So this is the false binary within false binaries. The point overall is that we're already going in this direction. And if your best choice is between Amazon or Starlink, the people have already been convinced that he's the freedom fighting the deep state. Seems pretty clear where this goes. But Amazon's there just in case for good measure. Incredible. Now it says Starlink will soon be the largest internet provider of any kind in the world. Same point. Musk recently secured permission from the FCC to offer cell phone service. Internet, cell phone service, data collection. I mean, you just run down the list. There is literally no point at which this is not involved, or at least striving to be involved. The space internet of the future may become the central way that we communicate with one another as human beings. Information of every kind, including the most sensitive kinds, will flow through it. Whoever controls it will have a great deal of power over all of us. Now, that is the understatement of the century. I hope people can understand the severity of that, whether it is, whoever it is. And again, highlight that Derek wrote this back then. It's December 2024, but, way ahead of this. Now, I just want to show you again this video. Make sure you guys can see that. Yeah, so remember, this is Elon Musk's. It's a graphic, obviously, a video made, but this is in 2019, not even that long ago. This is what the satellites look like. And you can see down here, March, April, it's up now. It's going to be September, October, November, December. Now it's 2021. Look at how rapidly this grows, guys. Look at the satellites. Now we're 2022. Those are Starlink. Now we're 2023. That's your world right now. 2024. That's not a joke, guys. We just read through it. That is Starlink. That terrifies me. Like the idea of that, I feel claustrophobic. I just hope people can recognize this. Now, next article, May 7th. U.S. pushes nations facing tariffs to approve Musk Starlink. Well, look at that. Washington Post reports. So there's 2 points to this. One, that they're basically using the financial dynamic to force in Starlink in countries that may not want it. But on top of that, that ultimately removing tariffs from Starlink. So even as they make the argument where it's like, well, we're not forcing them, they're making it more financially lucrative or financially, it works better for them if they go with the group that won't be getting tariffs. So this seems wholly manufactured for the obvious larger agenda that those of us were calling out before the last election, and we were all called crazy and blackpilled. And every second since this started has been rapidly going. The United States has pushed some nations facing tariffs imposed by Donald Trump to approve Elon Musk's Starlink, according to the Washington Post, citing State Department cables. The cables, and you could link to them, the cables show how U.S. embassies and the department pushed countries to clear hurdles for satellite companies, often mentioning Starlink by name. Those are the cables. The documents do not show that the Trump administration has demanded favors for Starlink in exchange for lower tariffs, the newspaper reported, but they indicate that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has instructed officials to push for regulatory approvals for Musk satellite firm. Of course. So go with this one and it will be half the price. Gee, I wonder what they go with. How do you know? This is just being carefully placed. We're watching them construct this right in front of us. Derek's article from January here. This is about the NSO group. Oh, I've got them open. Where he already talked about this as well. Israeli spyware firm NSO group found liable for hacks of WhatsApp users. He also points out that Meet the Spyware companies preparing to unleash their tech in Trump's second term. Spyware. Not this. That's nefarious. That's secret stuff on your computer that relays information back to Israel. That's the NSO group. That's Pegasus. And spyware maker NSO group is paving a path back into Trump's America. I wonder why, because it's an Israeli surveillance tech firm. Or rather spyware firm. That's what it is. Of course, the Trump administration is okay with anything Israel connected. The point, WikiLeaks on the 8th, today, or as yesterday, an American jury has ordered Israeli cyber intelligence firm NSO Group to pay over $167 million in punitive damages. Why? For the exact article that Derek was covering. Basically, it was found to have used WhatsApp to install its Pegasus software. And so now you have these exact overlaps being installed throughout this country, or using Unit 8200 Israeli startup companies, or the Signal, what was it called, Telemessage, the Israeli app we just talked about that Mike Waltz was using. It's in your face everywhere. I just wanted to make sure you saw that this is happening simultaneously while they consolidate this in the most alarming way of everything. Information, surveillance, data, phone calls, internet. And here you have Israel getting access to all of it, as far as I can tell. Everywhere. Let's not forget that Israel are on Twitter, for example. They're using a Unit 8200 company. Authentics, or not Authentics. Wait. What is the name of that? Is that right? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is Authentic. Why am I blanking on that? Yeah, that's weird. For some reason, I thought I was saying the wrong name. It is Authentics. It's spelled weird. It's AU. I'll include this article. The point is, this is a provably connected Israeli intelligence entity. They also use CHEQ to pretend to get rid of the bots when they really just flood the platform with bots. All of it is there for you. So the point, where were we? Oh, did I close it? Hold on. Okay, well, just make sure I don't lose my spot. So it's obvious to me how immersed this is with this foreign entity. And I'm not saying it's necessarily only because of that. I technically think, my personal opinion is that it's all part of the same agenda, the same technocratic, globalist, Zionist kind of blob that's rolling all this out. And you can see it's right in front of you. And Hackable Animal also points out, just kind of summing up what we just showed you, U.S. pushes nations facing tariffs to approve must Starlink. Message to the world: join our TechNate, connect to Starlink, or go broke. Seems pretty clear. Now, a great clip from Carrie Wedler, just calling out basically the hypocrisy around this. She says, not all MAGAs, but enough that it's a problem.
Question Donald Trump and his diehards, I met with a very rational, very logical argument. Would you rather have Kamala? No, I wouldn't rather have Kamala. I'd rather have real freedom, where millions of people don't get to impose their beliefs on millions of other people through the force of government. But since so many people have this NPC program running in their brains now, it's worth considering how MAGA might be reacting to such a consolidation of private, public, technocratic, authoritarian power and the expansion of government on numerous fronts. If Kamala were doing it. The rapidly encroaching tech oligarchy and their militarized artificial intelligence and surveillance ambitions, as the regime supports extremely anti-Maha biotech pharmaceuticals. Kamala's a shill for the deep state and big pharma, enforcing the 9/11 era Real ID Act that further paves the way for biometric national ID, ushering in the New World Order. Trump never would have done this. Continuing astronomical spending, including promising $1 trillion military budget and still arming Ukraine, ruining the economy with her big spending and warmongering, appointing corporate lobbyists, filling the swamp as expected, appointing shills for Israel while silencing speech for them. I will not stand for the, well, it is for Israel. She's not silencing speech enough. Declaring that only the president and his attorney general get to decide what laws mean for the entire executive branch. Communist dictator. BlackRock and financial mogul Charles Schwab directly benefiting from the administration's policies. Empowering oligarchs. Still no Epstein files? Only an agent of the deep state would do this. Prioritizing making a central bank digital currency through stablecoins after fooling people into thinking he banned CBDCs. Just another lying, conniving politician trying to enslave and gaslight us. Bombing Yemen and Somalia without a war declaration? If only the peace president Donald Trump had won. I understand why people voted for Trump. Years of being lied to, coerced, and forced to fund policies you don't consent to were good reasons to reject the party in power. But even if Kamala had won and implemented the same core policies towards centralizing control and trampling liberties in the name of equality and tolerance instead of MAGA's freedom and country, the Trump bootlicking solution would still be, we just need our guy sitting on the throne. We just haven't elected the right people yet. The real problem is my ideology isn't being imposed through government force. This is ultimately the same resistance Democrats offer to Trump. The knee-jerk question, would you rather have Kamala, is itself a reflection of the indoctrination and enslavement. Accepting two parties and two slightly different flavors of tyranny as if they're your only options when you could break free of the paradigm altogether. You can deem your rabid subservience to Trump and government at large pragmatism because you perceive this as better than the alternative. But it's not pragmatic if you lose your freedom and your rationalizations for these encroachments keep the insidious system afloat with the same technocratic, authoritarian, militarist trajectory that would have occurred under Kamala. If you want this dystopia to end, no matter which politician or party it comes from, it has to be more than dissenting based on who's in power. Your skepticism of authority must evolve past partisanship to the root of the problem, the power itself. You might want to stop asking if people would rather have Kamala and start asking yourself why you're incapable of questioning tyranny when you think it's being done in your name.
That is why I love her work, man. Now, just like with me, you really do have to sort of either slow it down for some people, but listen, slow it down if you need to, and absorb the points that she's making. I mean, absorb every single thing that it's logic. I don't even know how you could disagree with what she's saying. You may not like the framing, but it's obviously, it's just important to see that, because I am of the mind that the vast majority of people, if truly confronted with it, are of the same mind. They're just tricked or lied to or forced or cajoled. They're just like with COVID-19. They get driven into choosing one of the sides that are presented for them because they think that's all that's there. That's exactly the point she's making. I know we're out there, guys. I know you're there. You know, it's just people, we need to start recognizing whether or not that's the case, that it behooves you to start screaming what you believe or just expressing what you believe. Now, lastly, Patriot Voice, I believe it was a conservative that was, somewhat pro-Trump until he started recognizing the problems, and good for him for calling it out. Looks like the whole Maha deal was just a clever cover for bringing in the total AI governance into the healthcare and FDI oversight. Hey, don't forget this. I'll include this as well. The impending future of AI government, but who controls the AI? Just get the sense this is where it's going, and they're not even hiding it. They're like, I was of the mind wondering in this, like whether or not Doge itself is just like a test run of an actual AI government. It's worth considering. That's always how these things go. You find out later. But he simply says, you thought that Maha would be the end of mRNA COVID jabs and a return to truly healthy America? Think again. And he simply highlights the FDA back in May 2025. Today, the FDA announced that on May 22nd, 2025, the FDA Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee will meet to publicly discuss and make recommendations on the selection of the formula for COVID-19 vaccines. He also highlights on the next day, in a historic first for the agency, Dr. McCary today announced an aggressive timeline to scale use of artificial intelligence internally across all FDA centers. And you get where it's going. It's all continuing. Every single thing, Maha has been calling this stuff out, guys. It's obviously, it is in your interest to be honest about this stuff. Which I believe most of you do, if you actually care about what they promised, then by pulling your punch because you think that side's better, do you think that will bring closer to what you want? I mean, continuing to lean into the lies will never bring you closer, even if they're both lying, which is the point. Stand with your principles. Now is the time, and never been a better time to lean into that because of how clearly they use those things against you. Gotta stay. Right now, we are at an interesting moment where they're using the lies that we've been told forever to kind of bring us into the next phase. I think as much as it feels overwhelming, it's also an important time potentially with more ability to kind of stifle the growth there, to stop the transition in this important overlap. I think that's why it's become more intense than ever, because they know that if we stick a stick in the spokes right now, it'll cause more chaos than it would have before because of this transition. And I don't mean chaos in the sense that it will hurt. I mean, for them and their all-encompassing control agenda. But either way, thank you for at least considering this information. That's all I ever ask, is for you to consider what we're referencing, look at the source material, and just come to a balanced, non-partisan, objective perspective. At least let that inform your choices. So I'll leave you with a clip that I think this is relevant. I'll play this on the way out since I didn't have everything lined up. But thank you for tuning in. Please support TLAV. We definitely need your support. There's plenty of links down below. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Our favorite stories of the future show the ascent of humanity. Beyond sickness, beyond conflict, beyond the stars, and even beyond mortality. But what if all of our stories of the future were wrong? The assumption is that we will be there to see it. Today, we live in disparate perceptual worlds, where some can clearly see what others cannot. The fourth industrial revolution, giving birth to global technocracy. Elite masters transcending geopolitical boundaries, acting with impunity, celebrating our descent into bio-digital slavery. Even those who understand where we are right now may not yet perceive where we are heading. So what is the trajectory of humanity? Right now, we find ourselves accelerating exponentially towards the post-human world. How do we bridge our disparate worlds and raise the alarm? Press pause and look again at the world around us, on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, hopelessly addicted to technology. They tell us that artificial intelligence, virtual reality, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, synbio are all here for us to exploit, to set us free from evolution and become as gods. But as we reach into technology, technology also reaches into us. We have surpassed the Internet of Things and entered the Internet of Bodies, merging humans with machines run by AI. Transhumanism is the transformation of the human species that continues to evolve with and through technology, bringing us to a threshold, the singularity. After the singularity, Earth becomes a post-human world, where human beings will be rendered obsolete. How far-fetched is the post-human world? The enabling technologies exist. The policies are in place. Sophisticated military operations are already underway. COVID-19 was a psyop. The intention was never the disease. It was always the injection. The normalization of compulsory injected bio-nano enhancement. Now, the traces of bio-nanotechnology are showing up everywhere in live blood analyses. There, global technocracy is rising up all around us and within us, whether we like it or not. This is omnivore, and they think they have won. Every day, they tighten the screws. Surveillance, censorship, distraction, subversion. We need to be prepared for the most shocking of futures. But the story of our future is not yet written. In this vital moment, we still have time to choose. They have chosen their way to depart this world, but we will not comply. We are the resistance. Humanity's response to the fourth industrial revolution. We will choose our own way, and we must defend our freedom of choice, whatever the cost may be. Resistance means holding on to our humanity. If you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading. So choose wisely. What's left of your time starts now.